Hey, team players, and welcome back. Bob, we weren't here on Monday, but that was a crazy weekend that just happened. We had a lot of things that we got right, a lot of things that we're happy about, some
a lot of things that weren't on my
standings that we weren't too pumped about. I'm talking about you, Andy Dalton. But, overall, I think that there was some good stuff to take away from this week, really move forward. And, as we come back, this is true for the third week in a row, Bob. Positive ROI over the weekend. That's what we're talking about in terms of all the betting and the fancy stuff. So love it. You want to start, Bob?
When we look at things, there's just a couple truths that I think that we need to kind of get off of our chest. There's a couple things that we got wrong. Mainly being Ramondre on Thursday night. That didn't.
Thursday night was rough on us.
But I will say that there's a couple truths that needs to be said right now. Number one, doing really good, George. Here's the thing. Indy is bad.
Yes.
I explicitly say that because we had been dogging Caleb Williams very naturally for 2 solid weeks. And against Indy, they made him, he looked great. I mean, he was still making a lot of errors, but he looked great.
3 turnovers, which is why they lost that game. Which was really my only major loss of the day was Chicago not winning that game. Very upsetting about that.
And to George's point here, there was a lot of players this week. A lot of players where we're looking at just not scoring in what we needed. That like JMO ended up getting 1 point. We had talked about that JMO could be a little bit of a risky play. Hey, Recon, welcome back. That JMO could be a little bit of a risky play last week. But, for lack of other standings, you had to kind of play him. And I know we had a question on Wednesday before we knew about the Kittle injury, and someone was asking about Evans versus Juwan Jennings. And, we cautioned on Evans just because he was you didn't know on Wednesday what Juwan Jennings was going to do with George Kittle. But then he turns out to 46-point week. And so there's a lot of these decisions that we've got to be making for our own fantasy teams and for everybody else's fantasy teams here too, together, where we've got to take a look and we've got to go through the facts that we know about these players so that when we look at matchups, we are definitely looking at them the right way. So a fact that I know.
Well, before you jump in the facts, the fact is we were right over 80% of the players this week. So we got a lot of stuff right.
So Recon here, just hold on to your team. Josh Allen, Saquon, Kyron, Zay, Pickens, Laporta. Yeah, I mean, Recon, I'm really glad to hear that you dropped these points because we were a little bit sour on Kyron at week 2, and Joe was a big proponent of seeing if you can move him for an upgrade, not moving him for a downgrade, but seeing if you can move him for an upgrade like a Saquon or Jordan Mason at that time. And then Kyron pops off for 3 touchdowns. This team this week for you, minus Sam Laporta, of course, because he got injured, and Pickens had like a kind of a lazy kind of game. But this is the type of scoring that we're talking about here. And yeah, George, to your point here, Keon Coleman, and this is one of the truths that I want to address, right, is that we look at the Buffalo Bills offense, and the Buffalo Bills offense is going to be good.
Yes, it is.
It is going to be good for Khalil Shakir, a guy that we've been trying to suggest that maybe some people go out and get in some sideways deals. And it's going to be good for Keon Coleman. But when we look at this, Keon Coleman is basically a fourth kind of guy on the pecking order here. Dalton Kincaid is still up there. James Cook is the guy they want to get the ball to a lot. And also Khalil Shakir is proving himself time and time again that he's going to get it done. Keon, to what I wanted to bring up here about a truth, is Keon's going to have weeks where he gets a touchdown. And then there's going to be weeks where he's kind of not as involved. Christian Kirk and Chase Brown getting production was good to see as well, right? Christian Kirk especially. Joe suggested, maybe Christian Kirk would be a hold last week. He did perform adequately well. Braylon Allen.
I want, since we're hitting here on Buffalo, I want to hit on, and because this obviously affects Coleman a lot. I want to hit upon a key.
We'll get to that, Sebastian.
before Jerry Rice, and just follow me with this for NFL history's sake. Before Jerry Rice, it was very rare to just put all your eggs into one basket. And then after Jerry, obviously the Niners do it. They have the dynasty. Dallas does it with the playmaker. They do it down there. Peyton does it with his two guys. Gronk does it in New England. But before that, it used to be just throw the ball to who's open. That's what the elite best quarterbacks of the day did. Allen is hitting that status. Allen, I think it's going to really come out one day. Allen did not like getting burdened, forcing the ball to Diggs, which
That's
is what
fact. That's what I was trying to say. That's a fact.
These are all facts. Allen is talented enough to make your fifth receiver get 100 yards. You can't see this for most teams get their punt returner go get 100 yards. Allen can. Allen is the most talented quarterback in the room. He just hasn't beaten Mahomes yet. He will be recognized as that.
We'll get to that, George, for sure.
So my point is that if you're looking for your status quo, number one receiver tears the book off the cover, you're never going to get that this year with the Bills. Allen doesn't want that, and Allen's good enough to get what he wants. He doesn't need to do it. Minnesota has to give the ball to J. Jeff. There's no debate about that. But Allen doesn't have to have one guy. So it's literally going to be who's open gets the ball, and it's going to be incredibly matchup dependent. We just saw last night that Jacksonville just can't do anything.
But I will say this.
So,
to that end, Joe, to that end, is that over the last 3 weeks, the wide receiver, we positioned ourselves on Keon Coleman early in the offseason. I'm still on Keon Coleman. But like I said to many people last week, is that Khalil Shakir at this point in time in the season is a must-start flex position and is not really matchup dependent. He's getting he's getting similar amounts of targets as we're looking at for DJ Moore, right? And he's positioned himself in a good offense and he could potentially be much more depending upon the volume that he ends up producing over the given year. Again, like you said, I'd be a little bit, this was what we knew going into the offseason is that teams with uncertain wide receiver situations were one of those teams to target a lot of receivers on. And we'll talk about that dark side for sure. To get a wide receiver on this team, you were paying pennies on the dollar for Shakir, Coleman, and Curtis Samuel. And it looks like Shakir and Coleman are the ones, at least in the interim right now, to own.
Well, as you look at the long term of them, Coleman is the one who hasn't hit his ceiling yet. So Coleman is the one who's going to keep improving. Yeah. And so will Kincaid for that. Right? Kincaid's story is not maxed out yet either. You make that mathematical argument, Laporta, that he couldn't go higher. That's not the case with Kincaid and Coleman.
Oh, I'm there. I agree with you 100% on that.
All right, so let's jump into the questions here.
Back it up. But here's another fast fact, right, is that when we look at facts about this week, it's that Braylon Allen is going to be a thorn in the side of Breece Hall. This is
for the time being, yeah.
When we look at last week, look at the week prior, I believe I said last week that if you didn't have a better option, that Braylon Allen would be a good flex during the week. If you had a better option, I'd try to look elsewhere, especially for that Thursday night game. Now, you look at Braylon Allen, the type of production that at one point in time in the game, and I believe by the end of the game as well, he was leading the Jets in rushing. And whether that's because the Jets had a big lead or whatnot, there's a good chance, and it's a reasonable assumption to make, that over the next coming weeks, there's going to be some tough matchups, which leads me to my next, important fact here, is that anybody's playing Denver right now, right? Any number one wide receiver on Denver is almost unstartable. It doesn't matter who it is. We saw it happen with Mike Evans this past week, which we kind of knew that was going to happen, but for lack of better options, you might have started Mike Evans. And we were saying, along the lines of, dark side it is. And so we were looking at and saying, okay, well, Mike Evans might not be a start depending on who else you have. And, like we were saying on Wednesday, we were talking to someone who had Mike Evans. Juwan Jennings was kind of asking if you should start Juwan over Mike Evans. Anybody against Patrick Surtain right now, I think, is an unstart. He just locked out Mike Evans, George Pickens, and DK Metcalf. And you've seen what DK Metcalf has done the last 2 weeks outside of not being against Surtain. So I think that's a really important fact to kind of throw out there logistically here, because I believe coming very soon, if not next week, Garrett Wilson will draw Patrick Surtain this upcoming week. For me,
so let's pull up that schedule here.
Right, for me right now, and they also get Minnesota, then Buffalo, then the Steelers. So a guy like Garrett Wilson, and we'll get to all these questions. I just want to talk on each one of these points a little bit more, is that Braylon Allen over the next several weeks and Breece Hall over the next several weeks will be two valuable components to this Jets team, because they're going to be facing some lockdown number one corners over the interim. And
you look at that, Minnesota, all three of them, Minnesota, Buffalo, and Denver, they can take a passing game, especially a top-dependent passing game, which the Jets are, and really
Dan, welcome back.
So that is certainly the thing there.
And what I want to say, though, and a guy and Recon here about Braylon Allen, and we can talk more about him as the week goes on, but in games like this, I think that they're going to depend a lot on this running game, and also a guy like Allen Lazard. So for lack of better options in the other sides of the defense, like I said last week, for some odd reason, Rodgers loves Lazard. Lazard is capable enough to be a wide receiver 2 in the league. But I think over the next several weeks that he might be actually a very sneaky flex play option, just throwing that out there to the wind. Because I think with Braylon Allen and the way that these corners are probably going to play Garrett Wilson will probably have a good enough game. But what we saw, at least from Patrick Surtain, I'm not touching Garrett Wilson this week.
You don't want to touch Garrett Wilson this week.
And that could burn me, but also could burn you the other way as well. So that's just kind of a talking point that I want
to again, going against Surtain would not be there. So do we go London and Brooks for Harrison Jr.? I'd take Harrison on my roster right now. There's no doubt about that. Harrison's got superstar written on him, and Brooks has maybe we don't get on the field. His updated 6 score wasn't as encouraging as it should have been.
Yeah, when I look at this, Sebastian, one of the things I like to think about is the snap usage and, what's happening with the team. So a couple weeks back, we were talking about selling Drake London because, he just got a touchdown against Philly at the end of the game. But outside that, the game didn't really look great, right? Then we come to this week, and he's still heavily involved, getting a great amount of snaps, getting a good amount of volume. He had 9 targets, 6 receptions, but again, right there with Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney is apparently a really important cog in this offense, which we know maybe some of us wouldn't have said earlier in the offseason. But I look at this and I say that even with these touchdowns, I think that Drake London is a good sell right now.
Yes,
because you look at the upcoming schedule. You have New Orleans, you have Tampa. Carolina with Andy Dalton looks like a football team and not like a junior varsity team, which is a little wild to think about. And they have a matchup against Dallas week 9. And I saw something about Dallas in the chat, but in week
let's
9,
hit on that.
We'll talk to that, but Dallas is going to be a nice matchup for Atlanta as well. But to the end, Marvin Harrison Jr. is such an elite option right now.
We have him ranked for the rest of the season significantly higher than Drake London's rest of the year performance.
You look at this from week 3. So week 3, he had 3 targets. Week 2, he had 8 targets. Week 3, he had 11 targets. And by the way, he faces Washington this week, which Jamar Chase, who we said go out and get for some people, destroyed them. The next week, he plays San Francisco, who probably doesn't have as good of a defense as we actually thought. Then going out against Green Bay, which could be a tough matchup. But the Chargers, Miami.
Yeah, well, Bob, as I said, for rest of the year, we have Harrison ranked much higher than London. And Jonathan Brooks, unless you're in a keeper league, Jonathan Brooks is kind of a throwaway. I mean, the updated reports say maybe the end of October. And if you look at that, do you want a rookie running back who's trying to recover up to NFL speed, which he's never done before? Do you really think he's going to give you anything productive in the playoff push? And I would submit
Yeah.
no. So,
And-
let alone, do you think that this team is actually going to have wins or not? Because that was a mirage you saw yesterday. That was the definition of a major win, let down at home, get blown out by a hungry team. That was exactly what happened.
And so what we were talking about with Recon earlier, with Josh Allen, and I think this doesn't need to be said too much, is that I think many of us in the offseason were worried too much about Josh Allen, and we didn't want to pay the value, maybe in a best ball or in a home league, of Josh Allen, let's say in the late or in the early fourth, maybe early third, late fourth, fifth.
To round. That point, though, the best ball leagues I did cut the check on Best Allen or on Allen. All of those teams are advancing right now.
Yeah, and he's elite.
We did it sometimes. We didn't do it always.
And he had a bad week. He had a bad week last week on Thursday. And that's going to happen. But the fact that he went off for 4 passing touchdowns, and looked great. They looked great in this. They didn't even need another quarter. This says more to me about how well coached that team is, but it also says more to me about the Jaguars, which we'll get to after we answer.
Wait, here, there's actually a larger NFL point to that got confronted here. And this goes back to New Orleans in
week
Jonathan,
1 and 2. Hey, McSkippy, we'll answer all those questions coming up.
Yeah, we're certainly going to answer all your questions, guys. So the larger NFL point was one of the talking points of the whole offseason was no one can push it deep on a defense. No one can do that. No one can do that. Well, Carr came out and said, I'm not listening to that. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to push you back so we actually can have an underneath passing game. Well, basically only 2 quarterbacks did that in week 1 and 2, and that was Carr and Mayfield. Josh Allen's sitting there in his mini bye week going, well, what the hell, damn guys? And then he just showed you we all can do it again. And we also saw, by the way, Jennings do it in San Francisco. The myth of you can't go over the top of the NFL just got broken. These passing games, especially against those who don't have an elite receiver, this is about to blow up because there are a lot of safeties in this league who are not as good as sold. And we're about to see some big old scoring coming up here.
Yeah. And to this end, George, do I sell Mason? Here's what I'll say. And I said this last week as well. If I'm selling Mason, it's gotta be for a compensation that's going to upgrade me from Mason. And I think the only couple of players that I would right now, this point in the season, consider an upgrade on Mason would be a guy like Saquon Barkley or Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that those are the only 2 players. CD. I'm talking about in the running back department.
Okay.
That would be, for me, a significant upgrade over Mason. Now, Derrick Henry just threw up a 2-touchdown game. Is that going to happen all the time? No, but we know he's going to get at least 15 of these. He's at like 3 or 4 right now.
And George,
I think that if I'm moving him, or if I'm trying to go out and get a wide receiver, right? The only wide receivers that I think at this moment in time in the year that are worth it, Jamar Chase, I think is totally worth it. I think that if you can finagle your way into a Rashee Rice, that's totally worth it. Value-wise, you might say, well, Rashee was drafted. We're now in week 3.
Yeah, draft value doesn't matter anymore. It's what they're going to do moving forward. It's CD, Rashee, and J-Jeff. I mean, that's basically what you're looking to sell it for.
Yeah, I think that, and I think Chase too. I think if I'm moving across the board and moving Mason, that I want to get back one of those wide receivers. I don't know if I could get back one of those wide receivers right now, but that's what I would want out of it. I think you might be able to finagle your way more into a maybe a struggling Dallas and CeeDee Lamb than you would have basically out of all of them.
And by the way, this is now the time that the risk was here. And I'm going to hit on that point about CMC going to Germany in a second here, but I want to hit on Chase. The reason we were neither one way or the other on Chase last week was how did you feel about Burrow recovering? Because the thing with the Bengals is that they just let an offense that couldn't put the ball in the end zone against the Giants rip them apart. This Bengals defense is going to force the Bengals offense to put up 30 a week. They're going to have to. The Bengals defense is one of the most overrated things in football we now know. So Jamar Chase is going to be on this bus of putting up points. Likewise, Minnesota's defense is a whole lot better than we saw going into the year. But to your specific point of CMC going to Germany, there are two things you need to know about him before he comes active. Because he was they put him on the IR, they are required by league rule to open up a practice window for him, which can only be open for 3 games. If he does not return during that window, he cannot return. Historically speaking, most teams bring their player back in the second week of that window. So they activate him to practice for a whole week to get acclimated. He then misses that first game of the window, practices the whole second week, and boom, here he is. But him going to Germany should not be an indicator of worry, because at the end of the day, he's getting a free trip to Germany on his boss's expense to go check it out. And he's not allowed to practice. His window isn't open. He's not even allowed to practice. This is a free vacation for him.
Also, Joe, like we said, we're not selling Mason right now, but if you wanted to, another wide receiver that I would try to target, you're probably not going to get him away from the team that he's on, but Nico Collins. Nico Collins continues to impress and impress. Right now, he's the league leader in yards. I really like that. So if I were to go out and try to get a wide receiver, I wouldn't go out and get Hill. I would go out and get Chase, Rice, Collins, Jefferson, maybe even a Metcalf type of player too. Or while I think Mason and Metcalf is a downgrade, I think that it is more likely that somebody would give up DK than they would give up on Justin Jefferson, or you'd have to make a pretty.
And this gets back to the point, George. Don't get rid of Mason. Ride him. Ride him all the way. You won a lottery by getting him. Ride it out, man.
And the other thing is too, like I said, George has Barkley and Gibbs, and those are the only 2 other running backs that I would really want that aren't named Mason right now.
Sounds like you got yourself an amazing flex so every week.
We're good. Now the dark side's point there. Is Trevor Lawrence a bust or what? He certainly looks like, let me talk, then you can share what you need to share about him. Is that what we see out of Trevor Lawrence is like a microcosm of some NFL quarterbacks that we now know aren't super trustworthy, right? We look at these players and we look at specifically at Trevor Lawrence and we say, okay, dude, you've had the ability to grow. You've had the ability to kind of you've had different players. It's not like these players have been with you forever. You've had different people on the offensive line. You've had different wide receivers. You've had a coach that knows how to coach.
Does he?
We think. And we look and we say, okay, you look at his history here, going back to 2021. 12 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. 21 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. And then 2-1. And his completion percentage it's nothing really to write home about. I think if you aren't ready to call Trevor Lawrence a bust, at the very least, he is only a back-end starter in 2 quarterback leagues, and he's not even on my radar for a weekly quarterback with 1 start leagues, unless they're playing Washington or unless they're playing some team like that. And even then, I would be a little bit concerned because I'm looking at it and I'm looking at his fantasy points. And outside, like we talked about back when we were talking about Trevor Lawrence, I think in the offseason, is that if he doesn't get those shiesty rushing touchdowns on his record here for fantasy purposes, because he's had a couple of rushing touchdowns in his career, if he doesn't get those back-end rushing touchdowns, like in 2022 here, he did have.
Yeah, and that was his second year, right, in 2022?
Right, yeah. So he had 3, 4, 5 rushing touchdowns. If he doesn't have those rushing touchdowns in 2022, that 2022 number is not in the 300s anymore. Now it's back into like the 200s.
Yeah, you dropped from when he finished as the number 10 fantasy quarterback. But here's the bigger issue.
And I agree with this. I agree with this 1,000%, Dark Side.
Brian, yeah. All right, so Dark. So let me hit on the whole Jacksonville thing. First off, about Brian Thomas Jr. and because this is going to segue into some of your other questions we're going to get to here. I'm
We see
convinced, and
everybody's
I
question.
still
We'll get
am
to everybody.
convinced, although current evidence is going to say I'm wrong mathematically, but I am still
welcome.
convinced of this, that Brian Thomas Jr. was the best receiver at LSU last year. And he's the one that I wanted to have. I know Doug Problem has the Super Bowl, but he is the he is the problem. He got kicked out of Philadelphia within a year of winning the Super Bowl. He is going to be the first coach fired this season, and Lawrence is going to have an entire new coaching staff for at least 8 games. So when we look at this, what we're going to find out is, do they have the ability to rebuild Lawrence, or is he an actual NFL bust? He's 100% a fantasy bust, but is he going to be an actual NFL bust? And that's what we're going to find out the second half of this season. Right now, looking at his record, I believe he's 0-13 across his last 13 games. And it's not looking good. So you can't just say Doug Peterson's a good coach. You don't get kicked out after winning a Super Bowl 2 years ago if you're a good coach. It doesn't happen.
Hey, Joseph, this is the point I'm making here, Joe, with you, and what Dark Side I think is trying to make as well. Doug has a Super Bowl. He may not specifically be the problem. I think the problem is Trevor Lawrence. And
who was the guy in Auburn with a national title? You could luck in yourself into stuff.
But there's a certain degree that you have to think about here, and you have to say, okay, well, this is consistently underwhelming after underwhelming after underwhelming performance with teams with talented players. Travis Etienne's talented. Tank Bigsby has talent. Christian Kirk has talent. Calvin Ridley had talent last year. And I gotta, and you gotta think about it and ask yourself, like, it's time. It's time to cut shit on Trevor Lawrence. I'm out completely. And even if Trevor
I
Lawrence
think the league might be out with him pretty soon,
even
too.
if Trevor Lawrence comes back with like 5 touchdowns next week, I'm still out on him. And, for anybody who watches Backyard Breaks as well, Grant, who is the, the host and the creator of Backyard Breaks, he has so much stock in Trevor Lawrence cards. It's ridiculous. And he's going to be super disappointed because this Trevor Lawrence is not the guy. So, George, should I hold the Cowboys defense this week? They play the Giants or seek another. I can't play them if I go after somebody else. Because here's why, George. We have seen the Giants are not that great of a team. But what they're doing really well right now is they're moving the ball on offense. And they are one of their primary problems in the last several years is that they couldn't move the ball on offense. So their defense was consistently on the field and their defense wasn't very good. So you're wearing down the good players that they did have couldn't be good for long because they would get hurt. They were on the field too long. They were tired. So you look at this and you say, is Dallas a playable defense? While I'm not really keen on selling them right now, I don't think they're a start even against the Giants because Malik Neighbors has been tearing stuff up. Devin Singletary has looked very adequate to very good in some instances in time.
It's been weird.
And I'm out on playing Dallas' defense. And the one thing I need to say is the one thing about Dallas' defense that has been good for us for fantasy purposes over the last several years is getting turnovers. And they're not getting turnovers. And that is a problem. They're not a start for me. But here's
a bigger problem. Just specifically looking at streaming defenses for this week, there's not a whole lot of options that are going to be equal to, maybe even better than the Cowboys. Because we look at some of the usual suspects.
I know, Dark Side.
Carolina's playing Cincinnati. I can't trust Cincinnati's defense to save their life. You could go with Chicago.
We'll get to everybody's question coming down too.
Probably aren't going to get caught.
All right, I don't know
because they were definitely picked up last week. So, all right. Seattle is here as a streamable defense. They're playing Detroit, so you can't use them. The Jets are playing Denver, but they're probably not available for your streaming. You can't use the Chargers against Kansas City. You could use Houston against Jacksonville, but they're probably already on a team. Like my point is there's not a lot of good options for a streaming defense this week. There's just not. I think you have to bite the bullet and just use your Cowboys due to a lack of better options. Because you're not trading for a defense. There's no point in giving away a real asset for you.
That's the whole issue there. And we can touch on that a little bit more a little bit later. And should I hold McLaughlin? When it comes to kickers, I mean, for me, a kicker, if the offense is going to continue to keep moving the ball, I'm fine with keeping that kicker on my roster. Like, I'm not dropping Kyami Fairbairn this week because Houston didn't do well last week.
Mhm.
I think that when it comes to kickers, that the elite kickers will rise to the top. And if you don't have a guy like Boswell, where the Steelers just stall before they get to the end zone all the time, I think that you're going to have to experience some ups and downs with kickers over the next several weeks.
And that's the game.
And I think, yeah, it is the game. And if you're looking for like good kicker matchups, I can look into that a little bit more tonight, and we can circle back to that tomorrow, George.
You do love good kicker talk.
So Dan, how do you guys view DeAndre Hopkins' rest of season outlook after his game week 3? I dropped him last week, but should I prioritize him as a waiver pickup for wide receiver depth over Cole Kmet? He'd probably be my starting tight end.
Well, if you need a starter, you got to pick up the starter. That should always be first and foremost the role.
And like Joe said last week, we were on the side of I'm not willing to tie myself to any Chicago player right now. And I think where I'm fall at that this week, I'm not willing to tie myself specifically to DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is probably the Chicago guy that I'm not willing to tie myself in. 3 mediocre to very poor performances so far this season. While I don't think Caleb Williams is going to be like lights out superstar 363 yards every single week, because that's not going to happen.
No,
I will say that it's definitely worth considering Cole Kmet, because we saw Cole Kmet a couple years back drop like 2 or 3 zeros in a row and then get on a hot streak. So I'm willing to continue to buy Cole Kmet stock over some other players. Now, in terms of DeAndre Hopkins, yeah, the game definitely they locked out Calvin Ridley. That was not even like I was kind of surprised by that, but not really, but I was surprised by it. But what I want to say, leading the team in targets, 6 to 7 targets for 73 yards and a touchdown. That looks good. DeAndre Hopkins has the capability of doing that on a week-to-week basis. But your question is, does Will Levis have the chance to do that on a week-to-week basis? You look at this, and Green Bay took them to the shed. I went on air, we went on air a couple weeks back saying Malik Willis is trash. While I still hold that viewpoint,
he is, but LaFleur is just that good, and that was my counterpoint.
He looked really good in the games that he's been playing, because Green Bay is a good enough offensively coached team to kind of support that. But when I look at what they're going to be facing soon, week 6 would be the week that I would definitely start DeAndre Hopkins. They face Indianapolis. And then I might consider starting DeAndre Hopkins in week 8 against Detroit. But again, Miami game could be weird. Buffalo game, he's probably not going to get a lot of looks. New England, that game could be really strange. And then the Chargers in week 10. So when I look at it, I'm not really thinking about starting DeAndre Hopkins in all but 2 games. So if he fits your roster in week 6, pick him up.
Yeah, that's the key point. Is
over Kmet if I needed Kmet right now.
Yeah, if you need a starter, you take your starter right now. But as you look specifically at Hopkins, you just cut him last week. He's on his bye next week. So do you think he's going to go off against Miami?
Hey, Mick, welcome back. Carlo, welcome.
I mean, that's essentially what you'd be doing, because if he's already on your bubble of being cut, he's just going to get cut next week. I definitely am not using a priority on him. But if you want to just have him sneak on as an unprioritized pick, I guess, but your priority should always be on getting the starter first.
And T-Money here made that trade. We were talking, Joe, this was when you weren't even on the screen. T-Money, we were talking some trades to try to figure out how to get Jamar Chase. And it paid off for T-Money.
Good.
Love to hear this stuff pays off. T-Money, drop the trade in the chat. We're definitely willing to talk some more trades. McSkippy, we see you. We see everybody who's posted. Jonathan, we see you as well. We'll get to everybody as well. Traded CMC for Brian Robinson and Brandon Ayuk last night. I already have Jordan Mason, and room is Nico and Evans, putting Ayuk in the flex PPR. I think this is a win.
Love it.
This is a definite win, because here's what we saw last night in particular. When we look at this Washington team to me right now is one of those teams that is really better than what we look at on paper, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, Brian Robinson is one of those players that's not going to be, and we said this last week as well, he's not going to be the guy that's going to throw up 100 yards every week. But if given the opportunity to get a touchdown, he can do it. He did it last year when given the opportunity. The only question that we had with Brian Robinson is that how many opportunities would he get when it was valuable time to get them? Jane Daniels is going to continue to eat into that. That is 1,000% true. It's going to happen. But but it was
But
nice.
To that point, the net of Daniels being there running the ball is a positive for Robinson because of how it freezes the linebacker. This will be Brian Robinson's best career year. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So I like that part.
The other piece of it too is Eckler got a concussion last night. So
that's also true.
Already banged up. They're probably gonna whoever's on their backside there, But what I like about this is that he has not dipped below. You get, like I said about London. London got that sneaky touchdown towards the end of the game, but Brian Robinson is continuing to be involved. And this was a touchdown that was gotten in the first quarter, not at the last play of the game. So there's involvement happening there. And he's a definite running back too, to pair with Jordan Mason. Brandon Ayuk, I'm concerned, but I'm not hitting the panic button on Brandon Ayuk right now because, again, guys that sit through a whole offseason program aren't really up to snuff in the first couple of weeks. This is his offseason, essentially his training program. Juwan Jennings had a fantastic, stellar week. Juwan Jennings won't do that again. There might be a 50-yard, 60-yard game for Juwan Jennings in the future if Debo happens to be not coming back in a timeline that's good for him.
If you look at that game, this was another example of San Francisco playing a team that really only had one corner. All of the defense's skill and talent was to erase Ayuk. Yeah. And Purdy just gave the ball to the guy who was open. And if you look at Jennings and watch that game, there are times he is stupid open, like high school.
Wide open.
So I'm not worried about Ayuk at all. What I think it was a bigger testament to was make a damn adjustment. How about you cover the guy who's already scored 3 touchdowns?
So you want to look at these crazy stats here. Just looking at the advanced stats for Juwan Jennings this past week. Juwan Jennings' advanced stats were it was embarrassing. He had 149 yards before the catch. 149 air yards, right? His yak was only 26. The dude was wide open, and Brock Purdy was finding him consistently. That's what we like to see out of a guy like Brock Purdy, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think this is a
Brock
great
Purdy made himself a lot of money that day. There's no doubt about that.
I think this is a great trade, and it definitely buoys you a little bit because if Mike Evans ends up having a game or two where it's like not great, Ayuk definitely could pull some slack for you on the bench there, or on the back end of your roster. Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, and Kupp for James Cook and A.J. Brown. Thoughts? I have a lot of thoughts about this. There's a couple things that I want to consider. A.J. Brown will probably be back before Cooper Kupp. So that I want to say that straight up. Aaron Jones has looked good, right? Minnesota has looked good. We were very much disappointed in Gardner Minshew-led Oakland last week. Samir White, by the way, for anybody watching right now, he's a drop. He's not worth
We should not have been disappointed in the Raiders. It was classic Raiders. They came off a high and then they crashed really low. It's what they're going to do.
And if not a drop in deep leagues, he's definitely worth a piece to trade on the back end. He's not. I don't think he's worth starting.
And there's a chance they get absolutely demolished by Cleveland this week too.
I will say that in this game the offense flailed, but he still had 9 targets, caught 4. So for me, this is more like, okay, do I trust the long-term aspects of Aaron Jones this season versus James Cook's? And do I think that the combination of Devontae Adams and Kupp when he comes back, will they be better or worse than the combined effort of A.J. Brown when he comes back? That's how I'm looking at it right now.
Hey, Bob, can you look something up for me real quick? How old is Kupp?
He's in his 30s, man.
Yeah, I know he's in his 30s. But he's not past 34, is he?
He's 31.
Okay.
He's 31.
I want to hit this with thought. This is something I've been hitting for a while with the Rams because it's in the history of McVay.
Hey, Revan, welcome back.
I'm positing that by the time Kupp is healthy enough to play, the Rams will be out of it and they'll never bring him back. I am throwing that. True in the Kua, too. I think there's a very good chance the Rams don't bring either of them back this year.
I hope not.
And I really, it's the history of the organization. I
hope not for my team.
I appreciate that, but it's the history of the organization. So knowing that or believing that, looking at this trade straight up, do I want James Cook over Aaron Jones? Yes, I do. Because I do believe that as good as Minnesota's defense is, and they are going to rely upon the run, Buffalo's going to score more points. So I want the running back there.
The other
and
piece of this
AJ
too,
Brown,
Joe,
I just think is a better situation.
the other piece of this too is I don't think that this trade actually is super fair on your side. So like when I look at this, I think that when we look at Kupp and we look at AJ Brown, yeah, they're both dealing with injury. AJ Brown will be back sooner rather than later. I don't know if Devontae Adams is the piece.
You probably can do it for way less than Adams.
Would want to include. I think with the way that Aaron Jones and James Cook have been playing, that it might be. I mean, I would just leave Kupp out of it, and add in another piece.
Why don't you try to see if you can leave Adams out of it and maybe put in your flex too?
Yeah, McSkippy, if you're still with us, you can tell us your team in the chat. But I want to really hammer this down because while I think that this is definitely a trade that will be good long term for kind of both parties, actually. I think that there's a discrepancy that I have between an Adams and a Kupp.
I think the Kupp name recognition he still has, because no one else believes what I just said. I think that you could get this through with Aaron Jones and Kupp and keep Adams, and like I said, maybe put in a low point. I wouldn't put Adams in it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. You can definitely share in the chat. We'll talk more about it. What's up, guys? I'm 0-3. Team is Stroud, Adams, Wilson, Ayuk, Jason, Worthy, Christian Watson, Gibbs, Dobbins, Brian Robinson, Javonte McBride, and Bauer. Teamers are just hold tight. Here's the thing, Jonathan. How are
you 0-3?
Lost by 0.3 1 week and 4 points last night.
Oh, dude!
This is what happens, Jonathan. This is what happens every week, right? We walk into a week. We have a strong team. Stroud was a good enough play this week, right? And he just let us down. Dobbins was a play that we were like, we want to stay away from Dobbins this week. Brian Robinson there. Here's what I'd do. I'd get rid of Javonte, dude. I've been saying this for a couple weeks now. Javonte Williams is not worth it. This is particularly true because they gave a decent amount of carries to Tyler Batty. At some point in the year, Audric Estime will be back. And Javonte Williams has not shown anything. He hasn't shown us the Javonte Williams that we wanted when we drafted him. He has not showed us the consistent or like anything. Like last week was 12 yards on 5 carries. The week before that was 11 attempts, 17 yards. And then 8 attempts, 23 yards. We want him for the passing, right? We want him for the receiving work. 4 and 5. That's keeping him afloat, right? But he's going to be facing the Jets, the Vegas Chargers. There's opportunities for him, but I'm really out on him. And
John, I think I told this to you last week. It's going to be the same answer now. You have extra receivers, and the one who has
definitely get to those, Revan and Carlos.
And the one who has the biggest gap between their talent level and their perceived level is Garrett Wilson. People perceive Garrett Wilson still much better than he is. So I would move Wilson for a top-end running back. That's what I would do because you have the ability to start Adams, Ayuk, GSN, and Worthy. That ain't a problem. You can win with that. You move Wilson for a top-flight running back. Worst case scenario is King Henry. But you might be able to get him depending upon how the other owners are feeling for even a Gibbs, maybe a JT, maybe Saquon, although those last two might be pushing a little. We got to put some more pieces in there. That's what I would look to do if I'm your team. Wilson would be my most juicy asset to move, and I need to go get a true RB1.
Yeah, I'm in 1,000% agreement with you. I think Wilson is a juicy asset to move, and I think Javonte is really not worth rostering right now. McBride and Bowers for you also. I know Bowers had a down week and McBride had a concussion, but I think that if I were to look at that and I were to see, okay, where can I make major upgrades? Because we're going to be starting to hit bye weeks very, very soon. In I believe week 5 here coming up. So when I look at
just as a real life adjustment for all you guys, since you can't see the studio, we're about to get hit by a hurricane. So if we lose power, just give you guys a heads up here.
Yeah. So what I'm looking at here is to really get you the maximize. You're 0-3 right now. maximize your roster the best that it can to get you through these bye weeks. So Javonte, like I said, I don't think Javonte is going to be worth a roster spot in the coming weeks. So I think you have to move him or get rid of him and pick up somebody who is going to be worth value over the next several weeks. Losing by 0.3 and 4 is a bad rep, but your team is good. Your team is good. So if I were you, I'd maybe try to move Wilson and maybe try to move laterally to like a James Cook, even though that might not be considered an upgrade. I might try to move into a James Cook. Like Joe said, if you want to try to move into a Barkley or Taylor, it's going to be really hard right now. Christian Watson, I think when Love comes back, will be okay enough for you. But I really do think that you're going to need some support with the running back situation, especially with bye weeks coming. And McBride and Bowers, while I think both of them have true great long-term tight end one value over the course of the year, one of them is definitely worth moving.
Personally, I'd rather keep McBride because I think Bowers has higher perceived value. You could do a Wilson and Bowers move there. All right, so Mason I wouldn't.
Hey, Augusto, welcome. Yeah, I wouldn't do this, Brian. I wouldn't do this at all. Connor's good. Don't get me wrong. Connor is a running back that if I drafted them in the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, I'm kind of keeping him until the dirt falls off or until something happens later. He had a bad week this week.
Mm-hmm.
Those weeks are going to come. He faces Washington next week. That should be a good week.
He also was one of the few guys who's ever scored on Minnesota's defense. I mean, Mason's got talent.
He faces San Francisco in the coming week and Green Bay. Green Bay will be rough. LA will probably be rough as well. So where I see it at, I'd rather have Mason over the course of the next several weeks instead of Connor. And that's kind of how I view it. Do I think that Connor is also valuable? Yes. If you want to try to go out and get Connor, I wouldn't offer Mason, but I would try to go out and get Connor because I think that Connor's in for at least 2 or 3 good games in the next 4 weeks.
That is true.
Good to have you back.
The other option, problem you have with that to finish off the last Connor part is you're really just playing a game of what happens first. Does Run CMC come back from injury first, or does Connor get hurt first? And knowing that it's probably Connor gets hurt before Run CMC comes back, you definitely keep Mason. So sorry, Nino.
To this point, Nino, what we saw this week was weird. I mean, we saw Andy Dalton come back and the legendary, red rifle. And I look at this and I say, was this just the Raiders raidering it?
Yes.
Or was this Andy Dalton? Is there long-term prospects for Deontay Johnson with Andy Dalton? Because that game was good for him. It was real good. And for Pollard had a down.
All right, so looking at their next 4 games here. So looking at the next 4 weeks, Carolina plays 3 of the 4 of them are very soft secondaries. That being said, they're also playing offenses in 3 of the 4 of them that will make them have to score if they're going to win. Deontay is by far the best receiver on Carolina, especially if Thielen has any remnants of that injury that knocked him out that he later returned from. But if there's any remnants of it, that's the case. So, but you look at their schedule. Cincinnati just showed they can't cover anyone and that you can score on them. Chicago is the one who might be hard in the slow down, but there's possibly it's a low scoring game. Everyone's scoring against Atlanta, and Atlanta will score back on you. So you got to keep coming there. And then Washington just showed they're cool with playing a 70-point game. So that's their next 4 games. So I do like doing this trade and getting Deontay. One of the other reasons of full disclosure is I don't think Pollard in the long-term plans of Tennessee. I do believe as the season goes on, he's going to start getting phased out more for Spears. So I look at this as the undisputed building block of a franchise versus a Band-Aid, knowing that Deontay's probably even more talented and has a better situation. For me, this is kind of a no-brainer. Not to say it's high-end or going to be sexy, but I'd rather have Deontay.
So we'll get to all these questions as well. I want to kind of just follow up with Nino before we get to Aman's question here. For a 10-man league, I went and tried getting the best player in trades. Just sent Devontae, Pickens, B-Rob for Nico Collins, McBride, and Ty Chandler.
Beautiful.
That's the type of trade that you gotta go for the gusto and just start picking up players. While I think Brian Robinson has value here, Nico Collins is the best guy in that trade. And
no doubt.
I think that Nico Collins is worth a long-term even in keeper leagues and dynasty leagues, Nico's worth it. He's totally worth it here.
100% agree. And the lottery chip of McBride isn't that different than Pickens. I like that trade.
And so, Aman, we talked about this last week with Bucky Irving.
Yes.
That Bucky Irving is totally worth a start over White. Now, granted, they basically had similar, if not the same, fantasy points by the end of that game.
Yeah.
But they got it through different means. Like, you might like Aman, you might like White's receiving upside. And it's really disappointing.
Dude, Irving almost had 10 yards a carry.
It's really disappointing to draft Rashad over Kamara, Cook, and Henry at this point in the season. But when we look at it, there's just so much inefficiency here. You're looking at 15 for 31 yards, 10 for 18 yards, and 6 for 17 yards. And here's the other thing, too, is outside of game one so far against Washington, which we know is a bad defense, you look and that he had 5 receptions for 18 yards. And while those 5 receptions in PPR are nice, that's 5 points. That's a floor. I don't want a running back 2 in my league to not be able to consistently get over 10 points in my league or 9 points in my league. And he's not proving to do that. I think with Bucky Irving, at the very least, even though that game was kind of out of control a little bit, right?
A lot of it. They were out of it a lot.
You look at this. He had 9 carries for 70 yards, and he still had 3 receptions. So it's not like they're not throwing him the ball. They're just not throwing him that much. Moving forward, they play Philly, Atlanta, New Orleans, and Baltimore. These are all teams that know how to score. In order to get involved, yes, Rashad White is going to be involved, but I think if they want to win games, more games, they've got to start Bucky Irving. And I think the stats back it up because he's more efficient, he's a better runner, and he can still catch the ball.
There's no other way to cut this. Bucky Irving is a better NFL player than Rashad White. And I wish you were with us all summer long when we told you to take King Henry over White, because we probably said that 40 times.
Yeah. And Ahmad, to this question as well, do I like Reed or Njigba more over the course of the season? I like Jane Reed, but I do think that there is a great long-term potential for Njigba here. And I think
I need to back up though. I reading the second half of this question, don't trade Hurts for Richardson in either of them.
Yeah. So
don't do it.
When I look at this in terms of both of these players, just for everybody's sake here, I think that Reed with Malik Willis just hasn't, it's not that we're not getting anywhere really.
It's not Reed's fault
with this, but that's definitely not Reed's fault. I don't think, we knew this going into the Malik Willis era here for a little bit. We knew this was going to be a slight issue for Jane Reed. But you look at all these wide receivers, though, on the team. Their touch percentages and their target percentages in these 3 games are super low. And Jane Reed.
They're not throwing the ball.
But Jane Reed, for his abilities, right, was the best wide receiver consistently over the last.
Well, he's the best receiver on the team. Yeah.
So I think when you look at the schedule, particularly, they have Jacksonville on their schedule, Detroit, Houston, Arizona. These are all teams that they're going to pass the ball against, and it's going to be, if Jordan Love is back fully healthy, Jaden Reed is going to be exceptional. I think when you want to go out and get a player right now that's about to get their main quarterback back from an injury, I think that Jaden Reed is a definite great buy low option.
He is.
He's in the same vein. We were talking about, like DJ Moore and stuff, is that DJ Moore and Jaden Reed, these touchdowns might be hard to find, but if they get those receptions, they're definitely worth starting consistently, right? And so I look at this and I say, Reed is definitely worth it, but also Njigba's worth it. But I have Reed valued a little bit higher long-term over the rest of the season because I think Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Geno Smith. Now to the second part of this,
that's true.
Part of this, Richardson is an absolute no-go for me. Other than Jonathan Taylor, and we talked about this last week and the week before. Outside of that week 1, where the numbers looked extremely good, we were talking about and saying, it looked great, but you look at it and you back it up. 9 for 19 didn't really look great. There was a lot of long bombs to Alec Pierce. That happened again this week. There was 1 reception for 40 yards for Alec Pierce or something like that. You look at this. They're just not connecting, right? There's something disconnecting. There's an Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, but that's not really going to be a problem here, Bob, because Anthony Richardson only played 4 games last year, and he's going to get knocked out.
I think even with all the wide receiver woes that Philly is having, that with Saquon there, with Hurts there, with A.J. Brown eventually going to come back, with Devonta Smith eventually going to come back, I think if you're trading Jalen Hurts, you could get a way better return.
Much better.
Than Richardson and Reed.
Richardson should be a non-asset. Like I said, I do not start him this week. He will not finish the game against the Steelers defense.
So should I trade Jalen Water or JSN for Puka? I wouldn't. Puka, like we said earlier in the coming weeks, is that there's a good chance that if, depending on the way that the Rams are approaching this season, that Puka
let me say this, George. Unless this is the league where JSN was so far down your roster,
ARGQ,
it didn't matter.
welcome.
That would be the only way I would do this is if you're not playing either Waddle or GSN and you're getting Puka as someone for your IR spot and it's just a really long-term hold. Because if Puka does come back, he could win you a league. But there's also a very good chance he doesn't come back. That's why I don't want to trade anyone near starter for this. But if this is that roster you have that they're both on the bench, all right, I do that. But if either of these guys are anywhere near a starting lineup, you need to keep your starters.
Yeah, and when I look at it, though...
yes, I'm not starting either one of them. I'm playing... you got to be starting one of them soon because you're playing DJ Moore.
So right here, Aman, before we go back up to the other questions here, it feels weird starting Bucky over White since 42 snaps to 18. I would be... So when you look at it from last week, right, you look at 40 snaps per game, versus 18 snaps per game. I'm looking at it from an efficiency standpoint. If this coach is seeing that Bucky Irving is more efficient on less snaps, he is going to get more work. Mm-hmm. And it's going to eventually rise up, whereas Rashad will probably normalize and fall back down. And if Rashad is not getting volume, if Rashad's not getting snaps, he's not going to be efficient. It was what a worry that people had about Josh Jacobs, right? If he's not getting the proper amount of snaps, it's gonna be troublesome. So I think that Rachaad White for me right now is a sell. And if I am holding Rachaad White because I'm looking forward to a Bucky Irving injury or something like that, I don't think that Rachaad White is a starter right now. And if you are starting him, you're probably starting him as a back end flex and not a running back too. But I don't want any part of Rachaad White. I didn't want any part of Rachaad White in the offseason as well. Yeah, do I trade away Mason and Moore for Dobbins and Amari Cooper? No. I wouldn't. Going back to Mateo, we were talking about DJ Moore a lot last week, and we weren't willing to trade into DJ Moore. And if we were trading out of DJ Moore, we wanted a major upgrade.
If you cut out Cooper and Mason, I would do it. But
yeah, and if I look at it, Cooper had a week with 2 touchdowns. We here weren't expecting Cooper to have a week with 2 touchdowns, but, we did talk about Jerry Jeudy and that Cooper had the potential to do well against this secondary. And Watson is kind of just a mess. Everybody in Cleveland really just wants to be out of Watson, right? They're talking about wanting to trade for Russell Wilson and all this stuff. So I don't want to invest a lot in Amari Cooper. I definitely don't want to give away Mason. I do want to get into J.K. Dobbins. This week was a tough week. It's definitely a buy low week for him. The volume was there, but the Steelers defense is really good. Mm-hmm. And so for me, if I could do this trade DJ Moore for Dobbins and go wide receiver for running back, I would do that. But I wouldn't trade away Mason. I think that in terms of the long-term value of both Moore and Cooper is they're going to have good games. They're going to have bad games.
More bad than good.
With Moore, there is going to be some PPR value because he's getting 5-6 receptions, like kind of that Rachaad White reception total. But if Caleb Williams continues to do what Caleb Williams did this game, I don't know if that's going to be sustainable, like we said at the top of the hour. But I think he's more worth owning than Amari Cooper is at this point in time in the season. Mm-hmm. Joseph here. Nico plus Connor for Garrett Wilson and HN. Okay, I've got a lot to say about this, but I'm going to make this one a little bit quicker. I like the side of Nico and Connor more than Garrett Wilson and HN. When I look what you posted a little bit later down the road here, you're not sure if I do remember you lost Pacheco and you traded Waddle, Judy, and Warren for Olave McLaughlin last week. I think that going out and getting Olave was smart last week. He had a pretty good game. So you're sitting here with Connor, Amon-Ra, and Nico.
Okay, Bob, we had a little technical glitch there. Damn.
So we have Amon-Ra, Nico, and Connor. You have those guys. You went out last week. You completed this trade to get Olave and McLaughlin. McLaughlin is, going to be, I think, when we figure out this whole running back situation, it's not, the answer isn't Javonte Williams for Denver. So it could be McLaughlin there. Do I go out and do Nico and Connor for Garrett Wilson and Achane, knowing your team, knowing what you have? You have Connor, you have Amon-Ra, and you have Nico. You're trying to move Nico to upgrade another position. Here's what I would do. I would see if I cannot include Connor in a trade. And I would try to target Achane and maybe a lower, maybe like a fourth, fifth, maybe like a top 24-ish wide receiver, but I wouldn't necessarily want to go out and get Garrett Wilson. I would think about Achane, but I think that for right now, what I see that you have, Joseph, I would stick with Nico and Connor. I think I would stand pat on both of those, and I'd try to get another trade working. I don't really want Garrett Wilson over the next couple of weeks. And Achane, I do want him, but it's going to be a little bit of a tougher sled over the next several weeks for him too, until their quarterback situation is figured out.
Yeah, and Joseph, I don't know if you caught it during the glitch that we just had there, but Minko's better than Garrett Wilson. At this point, Connor's better than Achane, so don't give up the two best players in the trade.
Yeah, so I'm not about that. What do you trade CMC for? If I'm trading CMC, Brian, it's got to be for something that will be winning for me, like right now, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm going out there and I'm a little bit weak on tight end, I might go out there and say, okay, target the tight end owner that maybe might be a little bit worried about Sam Laporta, or might be a little bit worried about Trey McBride, and try to go out there and get like that with a Khalil Shakir and maybe another piece. Maybe I want to go and target the Dalton Kincaid owner and say, hey, man, I noticed that you might want a running back for the latter half of the season here. Mainly what I'm looking at is people that are like Dallas Goedert just had a big week. Mm-hmm. Maybe that owner also has Jake Ferguson or George Kittle. If I'm going out there and I want to trade CMC, I'm investing in a player that is either maybe going to come back in like a week or two, or a player that's playing now that has definitely some long-term potential. Like I said, a Jaden Reed. I would think about something like, if I'm trading CMC, I would maybe try to look at a Jaden Reed, Dalton Kincaid kind of combination there. That would definitely make my team stronger right now and in the long run. If I'm trading CMC for a running backs that I'm looking at here that could potentially have some long-term value over the course of the season, guys like Zach Moss, guys like David Montgomery paired with somebody else. I might try to do CMC for Kenny Walker and like a tight end or a back end wide receiver. I might even try to go after and say, okay, where's the Ramondre Stevenson owner? Maybe I know Ramondre Stevenson is had a down week this past week, but maybe even go after him in some other piece. There's always something to do, and I don't think, like I said earlier about CMC, the whole thing going to Germany, the whole thing coming back, the health is going to be weird. I don't know if CMC is, we had a trade earlier about somebody trading CMC a little bit earlier, Joe. I'm going to scroll back up to the top.
Yeah, well, you're pulling that up
here.
Brian, my answer is that just put him on your IR spot and sit on him. He's going to win you basically every game in November and December when it comes down to winning your league championship. CMC is still going to give whoever owns him a championship.
This is the type of trade you got to do.
0-3, you don't do it. If you have wins and you don't, unless you think your team has no chance of making the playoffs, that's the only reason you would trade CMC in my mind. Well, otherwise, you keep him on your IR spot, and you have a number one running back as soon as November happens.
So that's
how I view CMC right now.
There are other reasons, but we talked about this trade earlier. This is a good type of trade for CMC. So if you're looking for a trade for CMC and you're trying to trade out of CMC into something else, this is the type of trade to kind of target here. You're going to get two kind of mid-level-ish to good players.
You could be very good.
That will really that will elevate your first flex position or elevate your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 conversation here. So if I am trading CMC, I'm looking for that 2-for-1 kind of value, because maybe CMC and I have a couple other hurt players on my team. And that's kind of what I want to think about. Hey, HD, I see you there. We see all the questions. We will definitely keep rolling through them. Mick, welcome back. Any thoughts on trying to trade Adams and Rome for like Nico in terms of better my rankings? I think that's a great idea. Rome Odunze had a blow-up week. Caleb Williams had a blow-up week. When we look at Rome Odunze on just this past week here, those yard, like what they did towards the end, back half of that game was just kind of ridiculous to me.
That was a very bad Colts defense. That might be that probably is the peak of the Chicago passing game.
So you're looking at it, and again, 11 targets is fantastic. So we look and we see, where is that going to happen again? Well, week 6 and week 8, they play Jacksonville and Washington. By that time, maybe Keenan Allen comes back. When I look at a guy like Nico, you're tying yourself to a great quarterback, great wide receiver. So let's take a look at his schedule coming up, because it definitely has the Colts on it. We look at Houston's schedule here.
Houston's playing Jacksonville this week, then Buffalo, and then they're going to the Jets or to New England.
So when I look at it, even in the short term here, Jacksonville, Buffalo, New England, Green Bay, Indy, Jets, Detroit, Dallas, Tennessee. The back half of that season, Tennessee, Baltimore, KC, Miami, Jacksonville. So they played Jacksonville twice. They already played Indy once. So you're missing out on that Indy game. But
Minko's the much better rated player for the rest of the year.
What I'm saying here is that I think it's worth it. This is the type of trade that would get you Nico Collins. It gives them enough back that you're selling Rome after that big game. If you believe that Rome has a chance to continue to do that, you could keep him, but I don't think he's going to return over 100 yards every single game or get 11 targets.
I think he's doing it again
every single game. So for me, I think that I think I do something like that, Mick. I really do.
And that's also trading people at their peak. I love it.
Yeah, dark side. Terry McLaurin or Odunze this week. Terry McLaurin with that sneaky 100 yards coming out of this past week.
Well, but you look at those passes that they were hitting McLaurin, especially that touchdown pass at the end of that game. This kid is Daniels, again, going back to the draft rankings, had him as the best quarterback for the reason. This kid's putting the ball where it needs to be. We just answered the last question. I believe Odunze hit his peak last week. McLaurin is a dude. Washington is figuring it out. And you look at, not only do I want him this week, because this is going to be a shootout against Arizona. I mean, Washington just said, we're totally cool. You can't stop us. They just said that to Cincinnati, one of the most prolific offenses of the last 4 years. Arizona is going to do the exact same kind of defense where they can't stop anybody. This game could have 70 points again. I don't think that's crazy. So I absolutely want the player who's the number one receiver on a game that's going to have that kind of offense. Yeah, give me McLaurin all day.
When it comes to this week, I get concerned about Terry McLaurin's usage in week 1 and week 2 because they were all like passes at the line of scrimmage. This week, a little bit more. There was a little bit more happening there, 25 yards per reception instead of 3.7 or 8.5, which was crazy. But against Arizona, I think that he's the play this week, especially when you see what Jayden Daniels can do. Jayden Daniels will keep it alive, and I'm not super sold. Like I said, I'm not super sold on Chicago yet. Caleb Williams is gonna have to string together more of those types of games in order for me to really believe that that's going to be what the future of Chicago is going to be. But again, you're looking at who they're playing this week, and they're playing the Rams. The Rams could easily just run it down their throat with Kyron Williams and keep them off the field. But again, there's reason to believe that with the game that Juwan Jennings had, that Rome Odunze could do something very, very similar. So I think this is kind of closer than a lot of people think. But it's
not. One's a real quarterback, one's poser.
I'm on the side of Terry McLaurin than
Absolutely.
Odunze. Carlo, do I trade Tank Dell for DJ Moore? I would think about it heavily. Week 1, I was a big buyer of Tank Dell. But after a couple of weeks, it's become pretty evident that, maybe with a couple just a couple things going Tank Dell's way, that could change. But when I look at it here, and I'm looking at Tank Dell just over the course of the season, he's playing enough snaps. He's getting enough kind of usage here, but he's already injured. He had 62 yards this week, 40 yards week 1. Jacksonville's on the level. That game's going to be nice for wide receivers. But with him already being injured, I say make the trade. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule here. Again, we just looked at Nico's schedule. It seems very favorable for Nico and Stephon Diggs and not so favorable for Tank Dell. And if he's already hurt, I might try to get out of him. Because we saw Tank when he got hurt last year. It's definitely a problem for Tank Dell in for his future. Thoughts on trading Ridley and Hurts for Richardson, Olave? Don't do it, Amon. I'm okay moving out of Hey, Joshua, welcome back. Hey, Mick. Yeah, when I see this trade, Amon, I would say I'd be okay moving out of Ridley and trying to, you know me. I'm not a huge Olave lover, but I did say a couple weeks back, that Olave's usage is going to look very, very different when the games are much closer. And it looked very, very different when the game was closer. So I'm a buyer on Olave for the right price, but this isn't the right price.
No.
This is not the right price. I think I'm selling Olave for the right price, and I'm also buying him for the right price. I'm not sure what that price is right now because
it's lower than this. The other fundamental thought, Amon, is don't do Hurts for Richardson. Any trade that ends up you getting Richardson is a failure, and don't do it. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Now, I would do Ridley for Olave. I think.
And Hurts is better. Hurts is better right now than Richardson. So I mean,
yeah, no doubt.
Even with 2 hurt wide receivers, he still has. I mean, arguably, they both have the best running backs in the league in Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. So I would pump my brakes on that.
I still think I'd take Goddard over every single pass catcher on Indy, though.
I would try to get something. I would try to do something else for Olave. I wouldn't get rid of Hurts at all. 2-1 traded Godwin and Kyron for St. Brown and Dobbins. Thoughts? So I like it. I like it a lot. You gave up a lot of touchdowns this past week, but nobody really saw that coming. I got into an argument on Reddit with somebody about, nobody was really expecting 3 touchdowns, and nobody truly was expecting 3 touchdowns.
No, not for the Rams.
You look at other people's rankings, like Justin Boone. He had Kyron ranked as the 15th best running back on the week. That means that, yes, he's still starting, but again, we're not really it's going to be interesting to project Kyron going forward because, after week 2, there was a lot of usage still. The usage after week 1, we said, go buy Kyron after week 1. Then the injuries happen, so you kind of sours you a little bit. But this is a good trade. The reason why this is a good trade, you moved yourself into St. Brown. So St. Brown is one of those players that right now, Godwin, looked like he had those elite numbers, right? He was putting up great numbers. And I think he put up still a touchdown this past week as well. You look at long term, it's definitely something he's going to continue to be involved. 53 yards, 6 receptions, 9 targets. Amon-Ra, though, is the number 1 threat on that team in terms of passing game. We saw that when J-Mo gets kind of eliminated out of the game against Arizona, that Amon-Ra is still worth all of what we put into Amon-Ra at the beginning of the season, right, Joe? So, you know, I think this is a great trade because
absolutely. I think the one you did is great. I think your proposed one is great as well.
Yeah. So when we look at this, also trade Dobbins and Pickett for Marvin Harrison Jr. Yes,
because now all you're doing is you're taking Mason out of your running back spot and putting him in your starting lineup, and Harrison's now your flex. I love that trade. So I love what you're doing there.
To me, what you're doing is really cobbling together something that's really specifically awesome. That you're taking players that have had really big weeks. You're buying on a player that has had good weeks, but not like fantastic-y weeks. But both Amon and Dobbins are top tier right now. They're top tier right now. Kyron and Godwin, again, they've been putting up top tier stats. You going out there and trading Dobbins and Pickens for MHJ, I think is a glorious trade.
And even if you got to throw an Algier for one of his pieces of crap on the back end, I would do that.
Yeah, I'm in on that. I do like Pickens, and I do love Dobbins. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is definitely worth a get for everybody. Ridley and JMO for London. No, but it trims the fat on your team. I wouldn't do it, Revan. And
if you're going to trim the fat well.
I know we were in this conversation last week, Revan, when we were talking about which one of these guys start 2 out of these guys. And I know I suggested that JMO could be a start, but to be cautious of it because, that secondary could really lock him down in the deep threat. I think I keep both of these guys and try to find a different trade partner because I don't know. On a week-to-week basis, I think all 3 of these players have the capability of putting up the same numbers. And I don't really want to trade 2 for 1 unless I'm upgrading at a position of advantage. So if I'm trading Ridley or
Zay, dude, you'll be better off if you get Zay.
If I'm trading Ridley and JMO, I would definitely want to target somebody. You could probably. I wouldn't do it right now, but you could probably go out and target a guy like Chris Olave with both of these players. You could probably go after and add in, see if you can go after a Mike Evans. It's just something to really think about there in the long-term plays of the season here.
Because the fundamental answer is London's just not good enough.
Yeah. Thoughts on defenses for this week? Looking at the NFL schedule, Joe read you a couple of.
So if we're talking outright and not streaming, the number 1 defense this week has to be the Steelers. The Colts offense is atrocious. We saw what a better running attack couldn't do against the Steelers. And Richardson probably gets knocked out of this game because the Steelers are one of the few defenses that hit quarterbacks with a passion. Ask Lamar. He doesn't play against them anymore. So I would say the Steelers is my number 1 defense, kind of by a degree of margin. Number 2 is going to be the Jets because even though Denver finally scored, Bo Nix is still horrendous. The Jets have had that extra time off. I do think the Jets are going to pretty much manhandle them.
And
the Niners, New England, I think is juicy. Minnesota is a juicy defense. I don't know if Love's playing or not. So I don't want to give a comment on Minnesota Green Bay because if Love plays, I don't want a part of it.
Right.
But if Willis is playing, probably.
If
Herbert's out, Kansas City against the Chargers is beautiful. So that would kind of be like my quick list. But the issue with that, Revan, is all these defenses are already rostered. So when you look at it, if they're all already rostered, how are you going to be able to pick one up? It's not a good week for streaming. I don't want to discourage that because it ain't. But what it is there is a very real chance here that those end up being your top defenses here. So again, we are going to answer all your questions. Bob just had a little bit of technical difficulties as we're swinging through them here. Continue to keep shooting them out here. My thoughts on George Pickens for the rest of the season. So here's the issue with the Steelers. Possibly more so than any other team in football, the Steelers will do the least amount of exposure to win a football game. Now, Pickens has had 2 massive plays taken away from him earlier in the year. He caught, I believe it was like a 48-yard pass that ended up in a touchdown, got called back because of pass interference, and another deep bomb that got called back due to offensive holding. So those are facts. You can't get rid of them, but it also does show that the potential is there and they are looking for him downfield. That being said, if the Steelers have a lead, they are going to do absolute zero risk to be able to preserve that lead because they are playing like it's the 2008 defense and they can win with 14 points. And they believe that's true. It might actually be true as well. So when you look at all that, they absolutely handcuffed Justin Fields the first 2 games, saying do not throw an interception, don't do anything. This last game's the first one they were tied at halftime, and boom, you see them opening it up a little bit. It's not enough that I want to invest in Pickens down the rest of the way. That being said, he is by far the best Steeler receiver. It's not even close. but he's also getting the number one attention from every corner that they play. So we look at next week when they play the Jets. I'm not liking him at all in that match. Sauce is going to erase him. Okay. We look at it a little bit down the road. They played the Jets in 2 weeks. They play Diggs next week. That could be a tough one. So Pickens is one of these guys that we have rated overall rest of the season lower than most for all of these reasons. And then the other part is they're going to be doing a quarterback change here in the next 3 weeks. And we have no idea what the chemistry between Russell Wilson and Pickens is going to be. So if Russell Wilson comes back also on a conservative leash like Fields is, then you could have until Halloween that Pickens starts rolling. I don't want to cut him or trade him, but I don't want to think I'm starting him every week either.
Yeah. And McSkippy, going back to what you were talking about earlier, Joe, we were thinking about this with McSkippy to try to looking at a trade of Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, and Kupp for James Cook and A.J. Brown. Looking at your team with JJ and Harrison, Devontae Adams is definitely somebody you can move. You have definitely a stellar position there to move from. So McSkippy, I'd do it.
You should got more.
Yeah, I would do it. But I do think that, you could probably do a Dunze instead of Adams at this point in time, unless you want to keep a Dunze. But I think that upgrades you very nicely. And it really sets you up for a lot of success there. I think it's good enough trade, right, Joe?
I wouldn't do Adams, but I'd listen to doing it with a Dunze.
Yeah, I would definitely consider that as well. So Augusto, my running backs are Hall, Kamara, Etienne, Ford. My wide receivers are London, Rice, Neighbors, Godwin, and my tight end Bowers and Goddard. Oof. I had Goddard this week. Didn't win because, I had 5 or 6 injuries already, but that was really nice. Would you recommend me to trade Etienne and Goddard for Mixon and Deontay? I wouldn't right now. News is really spotty here on Joe Mixon. I just want to be current on the news right now as we sit here. They're going to be, he was without him this week. There's a chance that he might be able to go in a couple weeks or maybe this week. Jacksonville looks bad.
And he's not going to play.
Yeah, but I think that I would keep Etienne and Goddard, especially considering that Goddard will probably be a primary target, and this was something that we knew was true walking into this season. If one of these wide receivers were to go down, Goddard becomes a threat. If both of these wide receivers are down, Goddard is a huge threat, and that happened in that game. A lot of those yards that were accumulated by Goddard happened after Devonta Smith went down, and so
to that Goddard point. When we were talking about Devontae Smith in the offseason, we were doing all these studies. His value went through the roof only when Goddard was out. When Goddard was playing, he was taking away from Devontae. He's a key part of that Philadelphia passing game. Mm-hmm. So right now, looking for the rest of the season, we're not bullish on Mixon. We don't think it's going to be until about 3 or 4 weeks that he get back to full strength. Now, granted, Akers certainly did not take the ball and dominate with it. So they might push him a little bit earlier, but just like Warren in Pittsburgh, he physically isn't going to be at max form until mid-October. So do you really want to waste nearly half of the fantasy season on a guy, also knowing you're getting the worst pass catcher of the bunch between Johnson and Goddard? I'd rather stick with Etienne and Goddard.
Thanks, Carlo.
If you have to move it to get a receiver on your team, I would just go for a better package. I would advise that as well. When I look at your team, you don't really have a necessity for Deontay Johnson. If I were you and I really wanted to upgrade at my running back position, I would want to move on from Etienne. I would see if I can move Etienne in London for something really, really good. Yeah.
That's kind of my opinion on that, because right now where we sit in week 3 heading into week 4, I hate to say this because last week we were saying, Neighbors is a really good piece to kind of trade. I think that Neighbors right now is super valuable, but right now he's a hold this week. Rice is a definite.
You might get
for a while
gobble in return for him.
But if you could do something like, I'm just proposing something, Augusto. I'm not saying that it can be done, but I'm just thinking ahead. If I can do something like London and ETN for like Marvin Harrison Jr. and like Najee or something like that, get something
You're
low
not
on
getting that.
the back end. I'm saying that if I can work my way into something like that,
you'd have to throw Bowers in that as well, which I would be okay. If you give me London, Etienne, and Bowers in a conversation for Harrison and a mid-tier running back, you might be able to make that happen.
But if I did want to get Deontay Johnson and I wanted to find a trade partner for Deontay Johnson, I don't think that I'd pair Deontay with Mixon. That I would want to move somebody else. And I would let's keep thinking about that. Let's keep.
Yeah, Deontay can't be the best player you're getting in return. He just can't.
He definitely has potential this year with Andy Dalton.
But his value is you don't know that's lasting. His value is a touch-up. This is Carolina. They could fire their coach tomorrow or start the rookie again, just as likely as they are to score points.
So Jonathan,
can't rely on him.
This was what you were sharing earlier. Your team is Adams, Wilson, Ayuk, JSN, Worthy, Watson, Gibbs, Dobbins, Robinson, Javonte, McBride, Bowers, Love, and Ray Davis on the bench. It's a deep bench. Waiver options for running backs are Spears, Hill, and Chase Brown. I'd go up and pick up Spears, or I'd think about going out and picking up Hill, because Hill does have involvement on this team, and it's very, very clear that, while he's not like a threat to be like a fantasy threat right now, that if anything were to happen, Hill is definitely going to continue to be involved. But I would go out there and try to pick up Spears. I'd move on from Javonte. I don't think Javonte is a super huge asset for you right now at all. He was the starter, but he's working his way out of that role significantly. And when you look at Tennessee, Tennessee has been looking, particularly Will Levis, has been looking really, really bad. When we look at the running back room here, and we look at Spears and Pollard, right? On week 3, the receiving targets were 4-3, right? 4-4, and there was 4-3 receptions. The attempts were equal, basically. When we go to the previous week, Tony Pollard out-snapped him, or out-rushed him, and out targeted him in that game. And then in week 1, we didn't get really a super big return on Tajay Spears, but it was good enough in terms of the receiving room. Tajay Spears right now is like projects in the same vein as like a Rashad White for me, at least in terms of just what he could put up on in terms of if given the opportunity with volume. But like Joe said, I think that Spears is great to go after right now. So I think if I were to drop Javonte,
Jonathan, my answer, knowing that this is going to be a bench guy for you, my answer actually is going to be Justice Hill. And the reason for that is Baltimore has the last bye week of all the bye weeks, so you don't have to worry about playing any of the bye week games with him. And 2, he is.
I got you, money. We'll get to that.
If this thing keeps rolling out that Andrews is a useless piece in their passing game, and they keep looking at Hill, they're giving him an opportunity. So I think that the long-term ramifications of Hill might outweigh Spears, but I also think Spears is a safer bet.
Yeah, and
Chase Brown should be completely disregarded. They give him one speed out, but he is not the go-to guy. That is Moss's backfield, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, Hill, like I said earlier, I had, because of a lot of injuries that I had this past week, I did have to start Hill in my flex spot. And, I wasn't too mad about it, because at least I knew that there was going to be some serviceable role there. I mean, he had 5 points or something like that. If I'm looking for a bench spot with potential, Derrick Henry went off this week. And, that's not going to, like we said, Derrick Henry is going to have games like that. Then he's going to have games where he goes for like 60 yards, right? And in those games, they're going to get Justice Hill a little bit more involved. So
Justice Hill's going to have a better week this week because Baltimore's playing Buffalo, and they're going to need to throw it. I mean, he's a pure receiving back. So good job, Skip. Put in a Dunze instead of Adams. That's exactly it.
RGQ, I'm sad to see that you're 0-3. I don't like that. But again, it's been a hardship. It's been a hardship for a lot of people out there, because it's just been crazy in terms of guys coming out of the woodwork. Projectable stats have been kind of off. So should I drop Najee Ford for Chuba Hubbard, and should I drop Jerry Jeudy for Sutton, Wandale, Hopkins, Myers, Lazard, Mooney? And RGQ, we were talking last week about double dipping on Cleveland. We
Don't
just didn't have Amari Cooper there. But again, the whole Cleveland scenario, RGQ, is worrisome. I don't drop Ford, and I don't drop Najee. Najee was seen wearing a sling, but I don't drop Ford. I don't drop Najee. I try to trade him. I try to trade him for maybe go out, try to get a Khalil Shakir for Jerome Ford or Najee, and then moving on from one of the, maybe you want to trade both, depending on your team structure right here, RGQ. So should I drop Jerry Jeudy for Sutton, Wandell, Hopkins, Myers, Lazard, or Mooney? I would drop Jerry Jeudy for Lazard, to be honest with you. I think that Lazard projects decent for the Jets over the next couple of weeks. I also think that Mooney's been getting a lot of snaps, Joe, and he's been catching a decent amount of targets from
he has been.
And so when we look at a guy like Darnell Mooney, he's been very close to getting. He's gotten over 50 yards in 2 games. They play New Orleans, Tampa, Carolina, Seattle. Those are definitely teams that he could do well against.
That is true, but if you look at his team here, being in a half PPR, it's much more touchdown dependent. Of that group, Lazard has the best chance week in, week out to give you the touchdown. Because let's face it, they get close to the goal line, it's going to Bijan. It ain't going to Mooney.
And to this point, RGQ, do I trade Pittman and Ford for Diggs?
I'd do it.
I'd try to propose something like that because in terms of long-term trust in Indianapolis's offense, it's not there. Well, I do think you could probably, if you would have tried to do this last week, you probably could have got a little bit more. But I'm okay moving into Diggs and then picking up Chuba on the backside of this. That's definitely something that I would think about doing.
Yeah.
And then getting rid of, and then moving on from Jeudy. Because like we said, Jeudy was getting a lot of targets. There was no doubt that Jeudy was getting a lot of targets. But, this past week, it was just Amari Cooper's game. And that's kind of the way that goes sometimes. So I'm in the vein that if I go after that trade, that I do something like that. And I think that we're all kind of in the same boat on that, RGQ. So I'd go out there, pick up Lazard for Jeudy, and then I'd do that trade to get Chuba on my team plus getting Diggs. I think that's going to be some.
Or you could always try to do a 3-to-1 trade and go crazy with it. I mean, that's always an option too.
You could try that. You could definitely try like Ford, Jeudy, and Pittman, and see if you can move yourself. See which teams have a lot of injuries and need some starters. You might be able to move yourself into a Ken Walker if somebody's fed up with that situation.
Or you might be able to get one of the injured receivers back on the back end. Getting a hurt Debo on your roster, getting a hurt
you could
Devontae.
Yeah.
I mean, that's solid.
Maybe I don't improve on this idea, but maybe I'm seeking volume. Should I trade Javonte Williams for Zamir White? I think it's a lateral move. I think that we were talking last week that Antonio Pierce said, I want to get Zamir White 20 touches. Then for some reason, Carolina looked good and went off to a big early lead. And that 20 touches for Zamir White didn't happen. When I look at the long-term potential for Zamir White is that he's not getting the goal line carries. That seems to be Alexander Madison's role, which is weird. He's not getting enough yards on a weekly basis. And he's not realistically getting a lot of, movement anywhere else in the passing game. He only has 6 targets in the passing game to Alexander Madison's 9. So in 3 games, he's accumulated 102 yards. While I think that's better than Javonte Williams, and I think there's less competition for running back targets in there, I don't think you'd be too happy with either of them. I would trade him just because I don't think Javonte Williams has any long-term potential over the course of the season. And you might be able to squeak out a Zamir White 50 rushing yards and a touchdown, maybe against Denver coming up, probably against Miami, and then maybe again in that Denver game. So I could see the value.
You'd be better going. You'd be again. Bob's right. There's nothing wrong with moving Javonte. You should. Zamir Wright's the wrong thing because you're just doing a lateral bottom trade. But if you go after someone, so throw a name out here.
We'll get to all the questions that we see here. We haven't forgotten.
Go get Cleveland's back at running, or Chicago's back at running back. Go get Herbert. That would be still a trade you'd be able to get through. He does steal all the touchdowns off of Swift for the few touchdowns Chicago will score. It would just be in a better situation. So that's what I would recommend. Go get Khalil Herbert instead of Zamir White. And I think that would be an actual upgrade for your team and something you'd be able to get through.
KJ, I've been thinking about you all weekend. We'll circle back to your question in a moment. So drop Jerry Jeudy for Chuba. This was based upon what we were talking about with RGQ. Trade Pittman and Ford for something usable, then pick up Mooney, hopefully on free agency. Yeah, I think something like that is absolutely something you should think about. So if you're dropping Jerry Jeudy and you don't want to move directly into one of those wide receivers, move into Chuba. It looks like he'll have some usage as long as Andy Dalton is going to play decently well. And moving Pittman and Ford and upgrading yourself into something very usable, like we were saying, is definitely worth considering. I think that that's the best way to approach this for sure. I think a guy like Mooney or Lazard, I like Lazard for the touchdown potential because he always seems to be on Aaron Rodgers' mind, and they are going to score touchdowns. Revan.
Hey, Bob, before you bounce around, do we skip HD?
No. We're still going to get to HD. We have not forgotten about HD. Revan, Odunze, Ridley, and Najee Jamo flex this week.
We will have all our official rankings tomorrow.
Yeah.
But
I would
my gut says Najee.
My gut says Najee. He was dinged up at the end of the game. I would check in. I would definitely check in before the game starts.
We need the injury reports for tomorrow's practice.
That's a concern. But once we get the injury reports in, I can make a better judgment there. But I'm erring on the side of Joe here, and I think that Najee is the play. And then I also think that if I were to go to my second play, that I would probably roll out. I would probably roll out Odunze. I think that both of those two guys, with just the hotness that it was, but again, Najee is the guy for me right now as we sit.
And my second one's Ridley because I don't think Miami's going to do anything.
Brian Wild, 0-3, traded Lamar, Singletary in London for Jaden Daniels, Dell, and Josh Jacobs. Thoughts? So, Brian, I remember you asking about this last week, and I suggested that I didn't like giving up Lamar, and I didn't like giving up Singletary, but I did like moving into Josh Jacobs, and I do like the idea of moving into Jaden Daniels. I think that Jaden Daniels' production over the course of this season will at times mimic what Lamar Jackson could put up. So while I think that
it's like drinking a Bud Light
in name recognition, I think you're probably going to get back a decent amount of points most game from that scenario. Singletary into Josh Jacobs. I think that Josh Jacobs will pay off. He was hurt a little bit this week. I think that Josh Jacobs is a stellar player. And London into Dell is a definite downgrade right now with Dell's injuries. But with you have Mason as your RB1, I'm okay enough with the trade like this, but I think that you could have got a little bit more. You bought Jaden Daniels at his high point, I think, and you paid a lot to get Jaden Daniels at his high point. That's just my viewpoint here. I don't think it's necessarily a bad trade in terms of long-term season potential, but I would have tried to not include Dell to try to get into something else with Drake London. That's kind of my viewpoint there, Brian. Definitely not a bad trade, but hey, Mr. Grapefruit, hey 9-3. It's definitely something that I wouldn't have done. I would have played around with it a little bit more. And what I would have done was do Lamar and London for Jaden Daniels and Josh Jacobs and see if that would have been accepted. I would have kept Singletary and Dell out of it and only added in those pieces if I thought that they were necessary. But yeah, I think it's good enough. I think that in terms of your long-term potential, you weren't winning with London, you weren't winning with Singletary, you weren't winning with Lamar. Shaking it up a little bit it doesn't hurt. But like I said, I think either keeping London or Singletary there would have probably been the best approach that I would have taken on that. We went through that one. Bucky over Chuba.
I'd go Bucky.
I would tend to, Philadelphia did let up a decent amount of yards to Bijan. Last week, how did Kamara do against Philadelphia? Definitely a different style runner.
Yeah, when you look at New Orleans, basically didn't do anything.
Yeah, that game for New Orleans, it was kind of a messy. But Kamara got 87 yards. I think that Bucky is definitely capable of doing something like that. I think that we're going to see another 70-yard performance out of Bucky Irving, probably 2 or 3 receptions. Hopefully this week is the week he gets a touchdown, because that would really buoy the numbers a little bit more. Mm-hmm. When I look at Chuba, I think that Chuba is a valid start, and we can look into that a little bit more tomorrow as well. I think that Chuba is definitely a valid start, but I'm not sure that I would start him over Bucky Irving. He definitely looked good enough. That's what I'm thinking. George, I'm not playing either one of them. I'm playing DJ Moore, Flowers, and JMO. Yeah. So what we were talking about with what you were thinking about, George, in improving, you're definitely not playing Javonte or Zamir White. So I think it's fine to go out there and do something like that. Like Joe said, it's definitely worth thinking about upgrading as well. I see Z Smitty, HD. We will get to all of your comments. Jonathan, we see you as well. KJ, Camden, we see everybody as well. We'll get to all your comments and questions as well. Smitty, I see a lot of people talking about Juwan Jennings, which is fair, but this to make me want to run to the waiver wire and pick up Ricky Pearsall to put on IR. I'm in a 10-man league, and I don't know about Juwan Jennings.
Pause that, Smitty. I understand the desire to have Pearsall, but here's the thing. He hasn't been in NFL training for weeks now. He is a rookie, and one of the things with this offense is you need to be intricate and trusted. Jennings has put in his time behind the scenes for really 3 years. Mm-hmm. So I do not think that there is going to be anywhere near a correlation of Pearsall returns, Jennings gets diminished. Jennings is still going to be a guy who gets a hat every single week because of how he plays their special teams. I'm not sure Pearsall will even get to dress whenever Debo is back. So I definitely don't want to run out and burn my IR spot on Pearsall.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that either. And with that said, rank these wide receiver pickups in terms of who I would want to pick up. Well, everybody's going to fly out to the waiver wire to get Juwan Johnson. That's why I've been thinking about KJ because we were talking about Juwan Jennings last week. I think my waiver wire pickup this week is Deontay. With the way that Andy Dalton looked and with what we were talking about earlier with Deontay Johnson, is he's arguably the best wide receiver this team has. He's the best option that the team has to move the ball downfield. And while Chuba looked really good, and it's very possible Chuba puts up another great game, I think that Deontay Johnson is the guy I would go after. I'm actually kind of surprised for many. I'm not surprised because he put up some terrible numbers recently. But in terms of, I think Deontay definitely right now, as we see, because remember, last week we were talking, I wasn't really big on Andy Dalton to start this season. I said, it might take him a little bit of time to get rolling. Apparently that was only a quarter. Andy Dalton apparently didn't forget anything about, anywhere. But Deontay Johnson had struggled with Bryce Young. And when it comes down to it, they did say that Bryce Young might come back. Other teams they were like, well, maybe we trade him. I think that I would probably pick up. I don't think Juwan Jennings is going to explode again, but he could probably have another good week if Debo isn't playing this week. So
Deontay has much more long-term meat on the bone, but Jennings might have more short-term juice.
Yeah, I think that that's accurate in thinking about it that way. So if it were me and I'm looking at what the games look like this week specifically, we have they're playing New England. Juwan Jennings could be really good against New England. That's for sure, 100%.
But Deontay Johnson is also just a slot machine. When he's with a competent quarterback, he'll get you 8 catches. He'll get you touchdowns, but he'll get you catches.
Smitty, I think I go Deontay. And I think I ride the wave there.
I also love the second part of your question here, Smitty. Your guy's playing Garrett Wilson. Do you want to be Rodgers to try to spite the? My answer to this is no. It's no for this reason.
I like the idea of it.
I don't think Garrett Wilson's going to do anything with Surtain on him. Yeah. So I think that you're just hurting yourself out of spite. So if I'm going to go stream a quarterback that's streamable this week, assuming that Seattle was still out there, I'd pick up Seattle's quarterback because Detroit's going to let up some good passing yards. Mm-hmm. The next one, as far as streaming, if Carr is still available, maybe not. You can throw in Atlanta.
Cousins, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you could throw. No, I'm saying if you can get Carr, because you can throw the ball in Atlanta. Any other passing defenses that might have a streaming quarterback with them at the moment?
I wonder what Miami's quarterback will be this week, because Tennessee, that's a.
I don't even know if I want to do that, but yeah, I mean that's a candidate. There's not a bunch of them,
but I think in terms of quarterback play, I think that in this game, like I said, I think that Allen Lazard. If Allen Lazard's on your waiver wire right now, I would go pick up Allen Lazard. I think he's if he's there, he's the best underrated pickup.
That's the better spike play than Wilson anyway.
And I think that coming off of this, Aaron Rodgers is probably going to have a good enough week. I'm not saying that Denver's world beaters here.
Yeah.
And quarterbacks could definitely achieve against Denver, but we've got Baker that didn't achieve. We've got Baker did it. We have the Steelers quarterback. We have Geno. I don't think I'd play. I don't think I'd play Aaron Rodgers, but he has the pathway for 2 touchdowns at the very least in this game to Allen Lazard. I'm just going to keep saying Allen Lazard until it takes hold. HD, on to your question here. And George, you also have Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, I don't think Zamir White sees your roster, but that's definitely something really to think about. So HD, hopefully you're still with us here. Hey, Miggy, I see you as well. Camden, we see you. Joseph, I see you as well. Full PPR. Would you trade Gibbs, Ramondre, and Keenan Allen for James Conner, DJ Moore, and Brock Bowers? My current tight end is Pitts. I'd consider it. I think you're giving up a lot in Gibbs. I think you're really giving up a lot in Gibbs. When we look just right now at Gibbs' production over the course of the season, you're looking at pulling up my numbers here real quick. When you're looking at Montgomery versus Gibbs, we talked about this in week 2, basically with George plays. It's basically kind of the same. You're getting that 45-50% split. He's gotten over 13 points in fantasy, each week in terms of, half PPR. In terms of PPR games, when we're sitting here looking at him, over 15 points. Gibbs is a guy I want to buy. Gibbs is a buy I want to buy and not sell. And I don't think that what you're moving, while I like James Conner, and I think that, like we said, DJ Moore has potential in PPR, I don't think I want to give up Gibbs to get into Brock Bowers. That's kind of where I'm going at here. I think a more realistic thing is, even though Ramondre had a bad week, we weren't thinking that week was going to be that bad. We thought he was actually going to perform really well, but apparently, with Jacoby Brissett, stinking.
Yeah, but they have the extra week, so Ramondre should have a good week this week. Let me propose this idea, Bob. You tell me if I'm crazy for this. Cutting it down a little bit to a 2-person trade and making it more succinct for what HD's trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
Would you think that, again, just spitball me, tell me if I'm crazy or not. If you did Ramondre and Pitts, do you think you could get Bowers and Connor? Just hearing that out loud. Ramondre and Pitts for Bowers and Connor. Do you think that would be accepted?
With the way Pitts has played so far, I don't think so. Especially knowing he's in an 8-man league, and that Pitts is kind of like on that backside. But with tight ends being hurt, and
I think it's reasonable enough that you want to get laughed out of the room, though, and you could build off of it.
Yeah, I think it's even reasonable enough to do like Ramondre, Eckler, and Keenan for a combination of like Connor, Bowers, and maybe something else on the back end. I think that's more reasonable.
I was just trying to simplify, because in general, 2-2 trades get accepted more often than 3-3 trades. Yeah. I was just trying to make it easier on HD.
Would I rather have Drake London or DJ Moore? This is a tough choice. I don't really want either of them. But if I'm gonna buy either of them, I think that I like the touchdown potential of Drake London a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But I like the PPR totals of DJ Moore a little bit more. So that's kind of how I felt about DJ Moore a couple weeks ago as well, is when we were talking about DJ Moore or somebody else, I thought, well, he has the best likelihood to get over 100 yards if Caleb Williams is going to do well, because he gets a lot of volume. I think that I'd rather have DJ Moore than Drake London. So if I'm looking at this, and I just don't want to give up. I just don't want to give up Gibbs. So I try to put together something. Maybe Waddle, Ramondre, and Keenan for Connor, Moore, and maybe you can't ask for Bowers right there. Also, depending on the Kenny Walker injury, you might be able to sell Zach Charbonnet pretty high if people aren't believing that Ken Walker is going to come back very fast.
Charbonnet looked good. Charbonnet looked real good.
He looked really good. Really good.
But HD, to answer your question, our rankings have London higher than Moore for rest of the season moving forward.
Yeah. I think they both offer two different things. So Miggy, hey, not Asian, I see you there too. I got offered Tyreek and Charbonnet for CD. Oh, mind you, I have no good running backs.
What's your record, Miggy? Because if you got 3 wins, I'm pulling the trigger. Give me some CD.
No. He's getting Tyreek and Charbonnet for CD. Drop your team.
How bad are your running backs? Because if Miami halfway figures out a quarterback, you kill in that trade.
He's 0-3 right now. Yeah, there's a lot of bad luck.
You gotta get the starting running back. If you're 0-3 and desperate, you need to get the starting running back. It's the end of the discussion.
I think it's
Tyreek's not that big of a setback, even with no quarterback in Miami.
I think it's
this trade gives you potential for a blowout win if you end up getting a halfway competent quarterback in Miami.
Miggy,
Miami's in desperate mode for the rest of the season.
Who's your team again, Miggy? Can you post your team down in the chat? It's just unfortunate. I see 0-3s a lot, and it's just there have been, when we approach each week, and we see 0-3, there's been teams that really are just popping off for like no reason, and then you have a solid team that puts up like 80 points and can't put together, a decent week, which is rough because you all the situations are right and it's just fail.
For instance, in our home league, I've scored the second most amount of points in 2 weeks, and I've lost both of those weeks. That thing does happen. All right, so you traded
DK and Likely for AJ Brown. Here's how I view this. I love DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf looks really great right now. The stats are backing it up. He's getting a great amount of target share. He looks really, really good. Right? AJ Brown, if he comes back and he's fully healthy,
you win.
You are most likely not going to be able to do this trade if AJ Brown was fully healthy. So
that's right.
So kudos to you for going out there and doing
almost that. Certainly this is to the guy who has Laporta on his team.
I do think that, 2 100-yard games out of DK with a lot of targets against New England and against Miami. I wouldn't have traded DK yet because week 4 and week 5 they faced Detroit and the Giants. So
but you also wouldn't have had a chance to get Brown again.
You wouldn't have had a chance to get Brown. So I think this is a really good trade to think about. And that the fact that you did it, not Asian, that's a lot of guts to go after AJ Brown. And I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of that. I have Brian Robinson, Rashad White, Laporta, Ayuk, CD, and Murray. Yeah, you guys, you kind of got just on the wayside.
You need the running back. And then you also need to do the follow-up trade, Miggy, is you need to trade White before his value falls off the cliff.
Definitely try to get out of White, for sure. My running backs and wide receiver spots are locked in. Just want to get a better flex. Have Achane, Hall, Neighbors, and Rice. Yeah. I'm there with you, Mick. When we were talking to you earlier about your trade on the pipeline here that you were talking about, I think it's definitely I would love to go out there and get Nico, right? So if you could trade Adams and Rome for Nico, and then you're comfortable with your bench the way it is, and your back end flex, I'd do it, dude. I would definitely do it. And that's a definitive upgrade. Would you trade Reed and Aaron Jones for Marvin Harrison Jr.? I wouldn't. Personally, I wouldn't, but I could see the value there.
I would do it. I'll tell you right. I am on the Harrison bus.
I am too. I'm definitely on the Harrison bus, but I'm also on the Jaden Reed coming back bus, and he has been putting up not good numbers with Malik Willis, but like they haven't even phased him out of the game with Malik Willis. So, and Aaron Jones has been putting together a couple good weeks. This is the type of trade, Smitty, that I think this is good enough, right? It's good enough for what you're throwing out there and what you're getting.
I'd have them throw you something back just because I like the balanced trade concept. Figure out if you get a little bit of bonus on the back end. But yeah, I love getting Harrison.
Yeah, personally, like I said, I wouldn't do it, but I would want to do it. But I like Reed's potential long term, and I think Reed's potential long term statistically could come to, not even taking into account what Marvin Harrison has done so far. I think that Reed could probably return top 12 wide receiver value by the end of the year if Jordan Love comes back, and I think Marvin Harrison will return top 12 as well.
See, I look at it like this: Harrison's playing in the perfect weather almost every game because
Harrison's playing in the now. He's playing in perfect weather. It makes sense. It makes sense, Smitty. Would you do Reed and Aaron Jones for Marvin? Chubb has no value right now.
No. I'd pick him up just to pocket him. Because Cleveland's going to click desperate, and Chubb wants to earn some of those incentives in his contract. So when he comes back, he's going to run like a madman.
Looking at your full team, I would do this trade. So in a vacuum, I wouldn't necessarily do it myself. But looking at your whole team, I would do this trade, Smitty. And the proof is in the pudding.
Harrison is number 3 receiver. Dude.
You're putting Harrison as your number 3 wide receiver. You're putting instead of Aaron Jones, you're looking at Charbonnet or Dobbins. This makes your team way better. Do the trade, Smitty. It's no questions asked. It's looking at that. It's definitely a yes. Do that trade. If that's too much, what about Reed and Jones for just Marvin? I want another stud player for my flex. Yeah, I think something like
I liked it with Chubb.
Jones is definitely playing well enough that the person will consider this because they're probably thinking like I am about Jaden Reed, that Jaden Reed will probably be elite when they comes back.
You got to use Bob's sales pitch though. Everything Bob just said about Reed, you got to use that as your sales pitch.
So I'm getting roasted in my one league for trading Neighbors and Dobbins for Bijan, but I still feel good about it. I feel good about that too. Here's kind of the thing. Neighbors is getting an elite amount of target share.
He is.
He's been making Daniel Jones look better or like what Daniel Jones people thought Daniel Jones could be. And when you look at him as a player, he's just been
a lot of touches for a little frame.
He's been lighting the world on fire. 18 targets, 12 targets. They now face Dallas, which who knows what's going to happen there. Seattle, Cincy, Philadelphia. When they face the Steelers, he's going to get locked up. Then they play Washington again. So, as I see it, there's a lot of juicy meat on the schedule for Neighbors, and there's a lot of juicy meat on the schedule for Dobbins. But this is the type of trade that, you got to go out and do when you can do it. Bijan is going to return value right now. Mm-hmm. It might not be the value that people are kind of looking at for Bijan, but I have Bijan in our home league as well, and I'm not worried about him. The more Kirk Cousins starts to get a little bit better and more comfortable with that injury that he had from last year, the snap share isn't even like a contention here. 146 snaps for Bijan, 36 for Tyler Algier. Mm-hmm. He found the end zone again, he found the end zone for the first time. But other than that, 68 yards, 97 yards, 31 yards, a good amount of targets in the passing game. I'm not worried about him at all. And Dobbins, we love Dobbins. You can't find 2 people on the internet right now that love J.K. Dobbins, I think, more than the 2 of us.
I think we had him in like every best ball league. And well over 60% is our exposure is Dobbins. Like we have our money on Dobbins.
But again, you sold Dobbins very high. He struggled against the Steelers, might struggle against Kansas City. We'll probably have nice games against Denver and Arizona. But you're going out there and get one of the best players in the league. I don't think that you deserve to be roasted for this. This was the type of trade that if you made this a week ago, you were selling high on Neighbors' big game, and you were selling high on Dobbins' big game, and you went out and got Bijan, who hasn't had that big game yet, but can have that big game,
and will probably have much more of them in the long run. Yeah, I mean, you got to get over the fact that a lot of people are short-sighted. You got to understand.
Hey, Hunter,
game through the end of November.
Yeah, you gotta look in the long term, and when you look at it, Bijan has for the playoffs, Tampa, Denver, New England, Vegas if you go to week 18. I like that. I like that a lot.
Me too.
So T-Money, 10-man PPR. You got Burrow. Yeah, so Joe, what you didn't know, he traded away Mahomes and ended up getting Chase last week, which was
No, I love that. Yeah.
Burrow, Jacobs, Connor, CD, Chase, Kincaid. If you can do that, I'd do it, T-Money. If I can go out and get JT for Connor and JMO, I'd do it.
That's selling JMO a week late. I mean, if you can, I don't think the guy would accept it, but if you can get it through.
You would probably have to trade DK. And Connor potentially for JT. But if you could get away with JMO and Connor, I'd do it. If he comes back at you and wants DK, I think that's awesome. So T-Money, I mean, this trade for you, I remember you saying you had a little bit of cold feet on it. And we were saying that, like I said, I like Mahomes in the long term, but Burrow and Chase together is just elite. So I think you're going to be solid. I think if you go
especially since we just found out their defense can't stop anyone. I mean,
if you can do this, do it. If you can't, and you come back and you have to give up, a wide receiver to make this trade happen, you give up DK, unfortunately, to make it happen. But I think that right now you could probably get it done with a. You could maybe put Worthy into that deal as well to move up to JT. I think it's a little much, but I think it's worth it to go out and get JT. He said 3 good games in a row, and Indy doesn't seem to have a quarterback here, right? RGQ 0-3 as well. But see, RGQ, you have a good team. Like, that's the thing. Like, 0-3 is just it's crazy, right? And T-Money 1-2. Your team is great. So, you look at it, and a couple bad games here and there really sink you for a given week. So, 0-3.
Dude, I want to pair Pittman and Judy. Maybe Ford on another trade, but I want to pair Pittman and Judy to give me an upgrade there, so that I can easily put Reed in my flex every week and not have to think about it. Right now, Pittman being one of your starters is not helping you. Kittle's injury obviously ain't great either, but that's a direction I would look. You got hit by injuries, man. There's all around. Once AJ Brown comes back, this team takes off too. But I would look at Pittman and Judy to go get an upgrade at your receiver position. A guy that you could probably buy low, maybe even just for Pittman straight up, would be Ayuk. I think Ayuk's value is through the roof right now.
Would you do Pittman, power on him? Would you do Pittman, Ford, and Judy for Diggs and Debo?
Way too much for a straight up on one of the two of them. And you might be able to do Judy for Debo right now due to the injury and the unclearness of when he's coming back.
You'd have to do you'd have to do Judy and Pittman, I think, for Debo if you wanted to get Debo right now.
Yeah, I would rather go Pittman and see if you can get Ayuk outright with how pathetic that performance was and how much Jennings just got. You probably can talk him out of it. Again, you might have to go Pittman and Judy, but I think Pittman and Judy, you're not going to play either one, but you play Ayuk forever. I think that'd be a better direction for you.
Yeah, and in terms of who do I pick up, you were mentioning Chuba. I think, like we said, Mooney is worth picking up. I think Lazard is worth a pickup as well.
Yeah, but who do you want to cut for any of those? I don't want to cut any of those guys for his waivers.
Well, I'd cut Judy. Judy would be the guy I move on.
I'm moving Judy in a piece. I'm moving him and Pittman.
Yeah,
and then if you don't do an even trade, Mooney would be a guy to get. But again, you're talking so far down your bench.
If you do something like this right now, RGQ. And, Mahomes hasn't really helped out either, has been kind of underperforming as well. But when I look at it, if I can move Judy and Ford or Najee and upgrade a piece a little bit, I would then I'd be able to get a Chuba on my back end or Mooney on my waivers as well. I think that I'd be in a much better position there. I'd definitely try to do a 2-for-1 trade, even if I'm going to be targeting a guy like David Montgomery, right? A guy like David Montgomery is a target for us. He's been putting in the work, looking good. You might be able to buy into him right now.
But definitely move Ford, not Najee, because that risk of Najee is going to kill his value of what you're going to get in return.
Right.
And he's going to be healthy and a dominant player in November.
Right. But I'm saying right now, Najee is a better player right now than Ford.
He is, but the injury isn't going to recognize it, so give Ford instead. So,
Jonathan, I think this is I think this trade is one of those trades that could pay dividends for you.
Mm-hmm.
While I was down on Dell, I don't think Pacheco, with the leg injury that he had, because it's a similar leg injury as other players in the NFL has had, and Kansas City is proving that. I mean, you look, Carson Steele, who was who people were picking up at the waiver wire, we did say would probably play well enough. He got 70 yards, which is great. But I think with a guy like Pacheco, if they don't have to rush him back,
shouldn't.
And then he's not playing the rest of this fantasy season. And getting what you can get out of him, you moved yourself into Dell. And while Dell is a down asset right now, there's a chance that he could come back. But again, you moved an asset that's worth nothing right now for the next 6, 7, 8 weeks into your fantasy playoffs for something that could turn into something. So that's kind of the vein there.
And that's the end of the discussion. You won.
We just talked about that RGQ. KJ, I would like to know, we were talking on Wednesday, and you asked, should I bench Evans for Jennings or Deontay Johnson? And I need to know what you ended up doing, because I've been losing a little bit of sleep over that. Because while we learned that Jennings was going to be without Kittle on Thursday, and Evans for us on Thursday was a definite, if I had a better option, I suggest, maybe a JSN or something like that to start them over Evans, but maybe I wouldn't have started Jennings or Deontay over them at the moment because of the uncertain situations. I'm really curious who you ended up playing and if you ended up winning this week, because when Jennings and Deontay went off, I was like, oh, Joe, I was like, if we would have been talking about this on Thursday and not Wednesday, I would have been in a better headspace. But it's time for me to drop bum ass Javonte Williams. I agree, 1,000%.
Yes.
Have Hurts bye coming up also. Also own Mason. Should I drop Wright and pick up Garendo as a handcuff? CMC might miss more time than expected. I think it's definitely something to consider. You lock yourself in. Wright's really not cracking your lineup right now. With the way Miami's playing, do you want to invest in Wright? Right? He's not cracking your lineup. He's not even playing right now for you. Garendo will fit the same kind of profile, but protect you if Mason ends up getting hurt. If Mason ends up getting hurt and CMC comes back healthy, Garendo's kind of a useless asset as well. When we look at the snaps from just this whole season, Jalen Wright has had 31 snaps. Raheem Mostert.
So basically he's just eating that roster spot. Yeah, Bob, I'm with you on this one. I think that, first of all, I think, KJ, you're exactly right on everything you said here. Because this is just going to be a back-end roster spot. Having it as the insurance value is way greater than if it's right. Fire that out there, Bob.
Yes. KJ, I'm so excited. Because I was like, man. Because I did say, Joe, and I went, and KJ, you can back me up on this if you remember.
You're also 100% right on what you're about to do this week, KJ. I love that.
What I said to KJ was that I think that Juwan Jennings is going to get a ton of volume, but I also think that George Kittle will take up. We don't know what George Kittle's going to do. And then I said about Deontay, a similar thing in saying that, the volume will be there, but again, we're uncertain what Andy Dalton is going to do. But Mike Evans is going to have a difficult time. So you don't want to bench Mike Evans, but this is the legendary stuff that wins are made of. When you go out and you bench a guy like Mike Evans and you put in Juwan Jennings, you go in and you win the match. And you have a wide receiver that's facing Patrick Surtain, and
Surtain shuts people down.
Is going to be in your flex. KJ, I'm so excited. You kind of made my night there when you're talking about that.
And to all the rest of you out there who are sending us in questions, you see us jumping around, hitting the follow-up points. We are going to get to every single question and comment that was sent to us. Don't worry about that. We will get to all of them. And again, if you haven't team players, make sure you hit subscribe to officially be a team player for our next live.
So, grapefruit here. I think this is worth considering when we look at quarterbacks, right? A quarterback's asset. We can look at it in 3 different ways, right? Number 1, starting quarterback is an asset. Like Kyler Murray, definite asset. Jane Daniels is an asset on the week that Kyler Murray will probably have his bye. Can you look that up for me, Joe? What's the week? Who does Washington play the week that Kyler Murray has the bye? Also,
Right.
if Kyler Murray ends up getting hurt, Jaden Daniels is infinitely better than most things that you can find on the waiver wire right now. With that said, you need tight end help. And Jaden Daniels for Brock Bowers kind of feels.
Arizona's bye is week 11, in which case Washington will be playing Philly.
I still think it's a good enough game for Jaden Daniels to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at this and I say, okay, Kyler Murray's not a buy until week 11. Jaden Daniels just had like 2 great games. When am I going to sell him? Well, the value is high right now. It's not going to get really realistically any higher unless he starts to elevate even more.
Yeah, I think that's a fair trade for you. If you need tight end grapefruit, I think that's a fair trade and a good time to do it.
People might not like that you did it, but I think it's fair enough because you're getting a valuable asset back. And I think the games next week for Vegas will be a lot better. Traded Achane, Olave, and Terry for Amon-Ra and ETN 9-3. I like it. But you did give up a lot.
Dude, you got a mod, though. Anytime you get a mod, that's almost always worth the cost.
Yeah. Terry is definitely one of those guys that last week was a sell for me, because of the way that performance was. But right now, with the way Jaden Daniels looks, could potentially be a hole, but he could easily go back to putting up, 6 receptions, 22 yards. It's just kind of the flow of the game, the management of the game. At any time you could go out and get Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra is an elite level talent on an elite level offense. We're going to keep saying that over and over again. ETN is going to have good enough games at some point in time. Like Darkside said, we do believe that Trevor Lawrence is a fantasy bust. But if for some reason Doug Peterson and everybody down there is going to be able to pull them out of their asses, Travis Etienne is going to have the chance to get touchdowns. He's going to have the chance to get yardage
because Lawrence can't throw them.
I think it's a good enough trade. Would I have added in Terry into that trade? Maybe not. But I think it's good. But
it got you a mod.
Not knowing the rest of your lineup, getting Amon-Ra is definitely something that we always value here on this show. How much fab do I spend on Chuba? For reference, the highest bid was $7 on Keenan Allen, and the average bid is so far is $3 to $4. I think with the way that Chuba played, I think it's fair enough that 8 on Chuba this week if you have the money to spend on Chuba right now. RGQ, I know you were talking about floating out all those trades. I think running backs tend to go a little bit higher than wide receivers unless the wide receiver game was really crazy. Like Jawan Jennings will probably go for a little bit more. I think that spending 8 on Chuba would be fair depending upon your whole fab budget. Our fab looks a little bit different, so that's kind of something that I might be playing around with it this week too. Camden, I started Stroud, Gibbs, Ramondre Chase, Nico McBride, and Etienne with Daniels, Eckler, Waddle, Cooper, Ferguson, and Akers. Just got offered for Daniels for JMO and Bucky. We like it.
No.
You're
not getting enough in return. JMO has peaked out. That's my opinion on JMO. The numbers kind of back that those were more fluky games than sustainable games.
We got you, Andre.
So banking into JMO really isn't the value moving forward.
Yeah, I think Camden, what you're looking at here, like Grapefruit is trading Daniels into Brock Bowers. I think for you, where I'm looking to upgrade is definitely moving. Maybe I take Amari Cooper's good game. Maybe I want to keep Amari Cooper, and maybe I try to upgrade ETN a little bit. I love Bucky Irving, and I think that Bucky Irving has a lot of long-term value over the course of the season. And the numbers suggest that as well, especially if Rachaad White, is continuing to do what he does. You have Akers, with Mixon being out. I think if I were you, especially knowing Eckler's, concussion and whatnot, and Waddle being on whoever knows what the quarterback room there looks like, I could see your necessity to want to go out and get a wide receiver, but I would actually want to not move Daniels for that. I would maybe want to go in and try to move like Ramondre for Shakir and somebody else, something like that, maybe more than Daniels. But I do think if you're moving Daniels, just like we said above to Mr. Grapefruit, I think you got to just do kind of like a one. Jane Daniels is playing good. If the guy needs a quarterback, You could probably go out there and get an even better player than this. You could probably go out there and get a David Montgomery style player.
Mhm.
And if you were to package Daniels and Cooper, you could probably move yourself into something really nice right now. That's kind of my viewpoint on that. If you package Ramondre and Daniels, you can move yourself into something really good. So I'm not.
Yeah, the starting point is you're not getting paid enough for Daniels right now.
Yeah, Brock Bowers is enough. Even after that bad game, Brock Bowers is enough. But right now, this doesn't feel enough. Also got offered Tank Dell and Javonte Williams for Jalen Waddle. Don't like that one very much. I don't like that one either. I'm not taking on Javonte Williams, Camden. I would keep Jalen Waddle more than I would keep Javonte. Joseph, would you trade Bucky and Zach Moss, who looks like the guy?
He is the guy.
Kenny Walker and Worthy.
Yes.
It depends on the construction of my team, but I think I would. I like the long-term potential. We got you. We didn't skip it yet, Josh. We got you. It's coming down here in the pipeline, I believe. So when we look at we did skip you, Josh. We'll go back up to you real quick after we get to Joseph here. I would do that trade because Kenneth Walker, he could be dealing with a lot of injuries, but Xavier Worthy is an elite level talent.
He is. And
definitely with usages, you could definitely see with Travis Kelce looking very, 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 very old. You come and you look at over the course of this season here, we're just going to go week by week, especially we'll go down here to week 3. Xavier Worthy got a decent amount of snaps. Mm-hmm. Again, they like to work their rookies in. They love to work their rookies in. I think you do this. I think you sell Bucky at a really good value. You're getting back a really good value. You sell Moss. We love Moss going forward for the rest of the year. But you also have another player that is very valuable in Kenny Walker and Xavier Worthy. I think I'd do that trade. It makes a lot of sense.
If you look at them all healthy, you have the 2 best players in the trade.
So, Josh, sorry about that, Josh. We were jumping around too much. Hunter, we got you. Don't worry. We got you for sure.
We will get to all of you, we promise.
Yeah, we'll get to all the questions.
Tuesdays is our long days.
So, Josh, Jaden Daniels, Diggs, Rice, DJ Moore, Achane, Bijan, Pitts, Mason, bench, Caleb Williams, Jane Reed, Shakir. Okay. Nico Chase owner needs help at running back, and McBride Lamb owner needs help at running back wide receiver. Okay, this is getting kind of sexy here.
I like this. I like where we're going with this.
Looking at this, Josh, and let me see if also the Tyreek owner is willing to do a 2-for-1, but I'm 1 and 2, not worried, just bad matchups. Number 2 in points for, number and in points against. So here's what I see it. If I'm going after, I'm targeting, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week too. I'm targeting that Chase Nico owner, I think, the most. Mm-hmm. I'm not even considering what you mentioned a little bit later there, the Tyreek Hill owner. I'm not really going after the Tyreek owner. I'm going to focus on these 2 guys right here, the McBride Lamb owner and the Nico Chase owner. I think that with Chase and Nico, with the game that Chase had and with the games that Nico has had, I think you can buy Nico a little bit cheaper than you could buy Chase right now.
Probably.
They're still worth a lot, but I still think that you can do it. Now, I don't know if I want to invest in both Nico and Diggs. So with that being said, I think that it would be fair enough, and I know this is going to sound sacrilegious here, but I think that what I would try to do right now with the way that Jordan Mason is playing, that I would try to move Mason and try to get myself into Jamar Chase. And I would try to piece. No, I meant not Mason.
I was going to do Mason for Lamb.
Sorry. That I'd try to move Achane into a Jamar Chase or a Nico or an Achane into a Lamb. You're going to have to piece together a little bit of action there on the backside. But if they need help at running back, you might even be able to float straight up Achane for Nico. I don't know if I'd dig into both of those wide receivers right now. But
see, if you get Nico, you have to move Diggs. Mm-hmm. So maybe you work it like this.
You're welcome, Josh.
So the Lamb guy needs help at receiver and running back. So you're basically setting up a very nice 3-2 trade where you're going to get Lamb and McBride back. So I would start by putting Diggs and A-Chain and Pitts, Diggs, A-Chain, and Pitts for McBride and Lamb. I would submit that one down the pipeline first. That would be how I would start it. Because then if it comes back and just say you only get that one accepted, well, you just got Lamb and McBride on your team. You're in really good shape. And then you can turn to the conversation of either Chase or Ninko. Because right now you can't really have, like I said, you can't have both Texans. You can have one, you can't have both. That would be the direction I would go. Diggs, A-Chain, and Pitts for Bride and Lamb. See what they say. I think that is a fair enough starting point to make greatness happen, Josh.
That's a good point, Josh. That is definitely a fair enough starting point when we look at what's your team look like and what that team is potentially getting back. They're getting back value for sure. And with the quarterback situation, A-Chain is worth a little bit less, but he still has that potential to go for something really big.
And then you're still holding Mason when it's all said and done too. So you still have Mason on your team as well. That would be great.
Yeah. Andre, we'll get to your question in a moment. Definitely. Hunter, should I spend my number one waiver priority on Juwan Jennings, Cole Kmet, or save it? I have Laporta right now at tight end.
Here's the problem. Bob, I'll let you hit this one. I just want to put my thought out here.
Oh, go ahead.
If you spend it on Kmet, you are never going to pull the trigger and put Kmet in your starting lineup over Laporta. So therefore, Kmet should not be on this board. So then it just comes down to you want Juwan Jennings, who maybe had a one-off, or save it. That's how I view this.
So, yeah, how I view this is that, when I look at this season, Hunter, and I'm thinking about waiver priorities, is that Juwan Jennings just had that type of game that is worth a waiver one priority. It's worth it. Is he going to replicate those stats? Most likely not. The long-term outlook for him, it's not likely that happens. However, when I look across the rest of the season and we think about all of these teams and all of these players right now, is there someone on a back-end roster somewhere right now that could potentially turn up a 40-point performance? I don't see it, right?
Well, because the injuries that have it. Jennings needed 2 major injuries ahead of him at receivers to have it. Goddard needed 2 major injuries, and he got it. So you get someone who goes down 2 injuries, it should this week should have been one of the Rams receivers. Instead, it went all to the running back. So if you're going in the nation of what are we going to call it, I would actually, and we're going to give you the call right now, instead of using your waiver one priority on Jennings, if you just want to pick up someone as a stash, Tutu Atwell, as that game progressed, you can get with no waiver priority, and he is probably the next likely one to do it. They trusted him more as the game went on, and he got some big plays. No one else is on that Tutu Atwell bus. The Rams are certainly a team that has the quarterback to sling it, and they have met the criteria of the receivers being hurt. And here's the thing that happened, as much of a chagrin this is to admit, it's because the tight end didn't perform for him. Stafford looked at Tutu instead. So this is a downgrade. You guys, for all of you guys who watched the best ball of the summer, my round 18 pick, every pick was Parsons. It's not going to deliver. Tutu Atwell here in real life week 4. That would be my cheap one, trying to project it for the future. If you want to have an absolute long shot flex 2, don't need to spend anything on it, Atwell would be the guy to recommend.
Yeah, and if I'm not spending my waiver priority on a player, I would go out and I would consider both Atwell and Wandale. And like Joe said, with the wide receiver, with the situation at wide receiver being the way it is, with Kupp and Puka out, Tutu Atwell is going to be a part of this offense. We saw it; they continue to do it. Demarcus Robinson last week, we were talking about Demarcus Robinson. How involved is that going to be? Tyler Johnson.
He was the one who kept getting covered.
Exactly. Tyler Johnson. How involved is he going to be? All 3 of those guys are going to be worth considering. When I think about like the snap shares, right, for these players, I want to look at Wan'Dale Robinson for a moment because, like I said about Neighbors looks amazing right now, but on the backside of that, Wan'Dale Robinson's playing pretty good. We talked about this in the offseason, is that if Neighbors was as good as they say, Wan'Dale's going to have a good season. Wan'Dale's been targeted 12, 4, and then 8 times. This is a player you don't have to spend a waiver priority on and has long-term value over the course of the season. More long-term value than Jennings has. And to be quite honest with you, because of all the injuries that I've experienced this year, I've started Wan'Dale Robinson twice already. And he's paid he's paid decent enough dividends. When I'm looking at PPR, 11 points, 9.8 points, 13.1 points, and he's back end. He's the back end of the back end. So, Hunter, to answer this question, I think that either of these two guys are worth considering. I wouldn't use my waiver one priority on Jennings. I understand if you want to, because I think next week he's probably going to have another good enough game. They're probably going to learn how to cover him, but he's going to have a good enough game. He's not going to return 40 points. Maybe you're going to get like 10 or 11, maybe 15.
And I'd rather roll the dice on Atwell.
But I would rather not spend my waiver priority and get either Wan'Dale or Atwell because their usage dictates that they're going to continue to be involved in these games. And like I say for Wan'Dale, Dallas, Seattle, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, those are all defenses that can be beatable that are going to focus all their attention on Malik Neighbors after these 2 great games by Malik Neighbors. And Wan'Dale just kind of slides in there with a cool 40 yards, 6 receptions kind of deal. I'm okay with either of these guys, to be honest with you, Hunter. I'm definitely okay with either of these guys. Let's go back up here a little bit to Jonathan. I believe we're on Jonathan here.
Bob, you are on charge of this here. You are all over the place.
Should I trade Hunter Henry for Pitts?
If you can get him.
Last week Hunter Henry was one of our starts for Thursday because we, these games tend to favor tight ends and running backs. But New England, with Jacoby Brissett that game, they didn't have a chance. Realistically, there was no chance. And we should have been smarter.
That sentence is going to be said a lot more this season, by the way.
We should have been smarter as a collective community to think better that Ramondre would bail them out of that situation. They just abandoned
New England's schedule here coming up.
Hunter Henry.
At Niners, Miami, Houston. So at Niners, they're going to be in a shell. They're going to get blown out.
Hunter. We see you, gaming. We're going to get to your question very, very soon. So
I look at this and go, give me the team that's going to have the offense on the field much, much more. The bottom line, more total snaps you're out there, the better you are. I'm not sure the guy's going to accept this trade, but if you can get Kyle Pitts for Hunter Henry, you do it.
Here's the thing too, Joe. I was a big proponent of Hunter Henry in the offseason because he does provide, especially in best balls, 2 to 3 great games a year.
He's a best ball candidate, but this ain't best ball.
And then a lot of really crappy games of the year. That's the kind of the Hunter Henry MO. Kyle Pitts is kind of the same way for me, but at least he got 2 targets for 59 yards this week. He hasn't been lighting the world on fire. He does need to get involved a little bit more. Will they get him involved a little bit more? Definitely increase the targets 3, 4, and 5 over the last 3 weeks. Maybe that goes up to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 over the next couple of weeks. I don't see it, but I think both of these have similar-ish value on a week-to-week basis in terms of who I would want to start. Like I said to Joe a couple weeks ago, I got out of Kyle Pitts. I'm out of Kyle Pitts. But I think Kyle Pitts, talent-wise, I think that, like Joe said, I think he's gonna be on the field and they're gonna move the ball pretty well. So there's a chance that he gets that touchdown too. So you already sent the Judy for Ford, got it for Debo, got declined, but the dude is starting Ladd and Cam Akers. Also, I'm playing Ayuk owner this week. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You just kind of got to keep playing around with it.
Yeah, it's here. You just got to keep working.
With it. Gaming. I have Josh Jacobs and JMO. What running back could I get for that?
Maybe Henry.
I also have Aaron Jones. I could package in with that trade. And yeah, where I stand on this, gaming, you want to upgrade a running back. You have Jacobs, you have JMO and Aaron Jones. Should I get a package? Who should I get?
So if you're trying to upgrade one position, you can't trade 2 of it away. So it has to be JMO and one or the other of the two backs. That's the starting point here, gaming. But again, I don't think that out of the realm, Jacobs and JMO for a Henry is that far off.
Really, it's not.
Yeah, I'd go there. Maybe if that guy gives you gruff, you look at the Monty owner. That would be kind of the two directions I would want to looking at that tier of guys.
Right. When we look at the advanced stats over the course of the season here, and we look at attempts, right? I want to look at how many attempts that these players have gotten. Josh Jacobs is 62 in attempts, and he also has 4 targets, which isn't great. Then I come down and I look at Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has had 20 less attempts, but 14 targets. So we're looking at, in terms of where they're at, it's pretty much a similar-ish value where Josh Jacobs is getting more of it in the run game and Aaron Jones is balancing a little bit more. When we look at the yardage totals, Aaron Jones has more yards, I believe, right now. Total yards, not rushing yards, but total yards than Jacobs. Now, the question would be for me is, do I trust? And again, like Joe said, Monty's at 231, which is right around Aaron Jones. I think you might not even have to do a package deal. You could just move straight. You can move Aaron Jones straight into Montgomery. But what I think you could get for Jacobs and JMO would be not even Monty. I think you can move yourself into a Gibbs with a trade like that. That's
if you get Gibbs, that's a win.
That's the type of trade where, Monty has more yards than Gibbs right now in terms of rushing yards, but that's the type of trade that you can package JMO's hot start with a dud week with Jacobs, and you could start talking to the owner that has Gibbs. You might not be able to get Gibbs straight away, but you can at least enter into a conversation with the owner that has Gibbs. But you're more likely, if you want to move out of Aaron Jones or if you want to move out of Jacobs, you could very likely just make a lateral trade for a guy like James Cook, or do David Montgomery and maybe somebody else. But I think that realistically, yardage wise, these two players, I don't necessarily need to trade them. But if I were going to trade them, I would want to move up myself into the Gibbs, the Bijan kind of conversation. That's where I'd want to be at personally. Connor, can we drop Zamir White? Yes. Zamir White is a piece that can be dropped almost in every single league, Connor. So I hope you're still with us here, Connor, as we answer that question. Hey, Chaka. Hey, Monkey. So, Connor, yes, Zamir White is droppable. He's not getting what we need to get him. If you're gonna drop him, maybe you can try to trade him first. Trade him first. But if he doesn't fit this roster for you right now and you don't want to deal with this headache, trade Zamir White. He's, like I said, he's probably going to pop off a couple of games at 50 yards and a touchdown somewhere along the line. It's going to happen. But do you want to wait that long? Do you want somebody else to start him and then feed them the 3 points that Zamir White's getting? I'm okay with doing something like that.
Do a 2-for-1 trade. Have White be the extra tag on.
Yeah. Andre, need help with this team. 1-2, tough matchup this week. Redraft, 12-team, full PPR. Mahomes, Bijan, Etienne, DK, Pickens, Ferguson, Flex McLaurin, benches, Chase Brown, Pollard, Coleman, Worthy, Demarcus Robinson, Darnold.
And before you answer this, Bob, Andre, that was the perfect way to submit the question and your roster. You told us everything. Redraft, 12-team. Thank you for that. I wish we could copy and paste that template.
That helps.
You were the man, Andre.
That helps Joe out a lot. To be honest with you, and just kind of rolling through kind of the schedule this week, I think that out of all the guys, that would probably be my starting lineup too. We
need to make your starting lineup better here, bro. That's what we're going to work on right now.
And that's what we're looking to upgrade. Looking to upgrade at the wide receiver position. So where I see this at, I might, if I'm feeling bold and Darnold's knee is okay, if Darnold's knee is okay and I'm feeling bold, maybe I played him against Green Bay. The divisional matchup tends to be a little bit trickier or hostile environment.
No, dude, you're playing Mahomes against the Chargers. He always balls out against the Chargers.
He does often go out. That would be the only.
You're also starting Worthy, by the way. So what
Uh,
I would do, you start, well, unless we're about to do something major here, what I would do as far as a proposal to you, McLaurin just has that big week, right? I would look at starting with McLaurin or Pickens, maybe even Pickens, because I'm a little bit down further on him, as the central piece of a trade. And then I would just walk backwards and go, who is the second piece I want to get rid of?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that you're probably going to want to have to do some form of a 2-1 or maybe a lopsided 2-2. I'm probably looking at Pollard as the guy I'm going to throw in off of your bench. So I'm going Pickens or McLaurin and definitely Pollard as the second. Yep. And I'm going to be looking to get into the upgraded front. That's where I'm looking to get into. Maybe I get AJ Brown a week before he comes back, and then I just accept that I'm playing Worthy this week and I'm eating it. That might actually be your best bet. Take him a week early before he's healthy. I'm giving you, two quality starters in Pollard and Pickens. Mm-hmm. This week I'm okay. I'm playing Worthy anyway. He's going to rip the Chargers apart because that's what the Chiefs do. That's how I would play this. And then, like I said, the guy comes back and goes, I don't want Pickens. You do the same trade with McLaurin, you see what happens.
Yeah, and also if I'm looking at wide receivers to kind of upgrade to get into right now based off of your team, I'm really trying to buy into Jane Reed.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Jane Reed will be not very expensive right now. You might even be able to flip Pollard for Reed straight up. And I think that Reed would definitely most weeks start over George Pickens. I do still like George Pickens. George Pickens.
Yeah, but we need to clean up his decisions, man.
But
we need to really upgrade so there's no thinking.
Yeah, I think if I'm massively upgrading, what I would want to get, not even thinking about like names on names there. I think what I'd like to do, and Joe, you said it really well. McLaurin's and Pickens plus Pollard. Moving that into something else. Mm-hmm. You might even be able to do something massive. Find that Jordan Love owner. Find a guy struggling at the quarterback position and move Darnold. Darnold plus Pickens and Pollard could probably move you into something super elite, into a crazy 3-for-1, Andre.
Also, but I don't know if he's getting a quarterback. Well, it's only a 12-man, one quarterback league. He's probably going to be able to stream one for that bye week. Yeah, you should be fine doing that.
Yeah, I would. The guys I would try to move up to, I would want to move into Rishi Rice, knowing I have Patrick Mahomes. I'd want to move into Rice. I think Rice is a valuable wide receiver right now. He has been continue to be valuable. Again, I can't stress this enough with Nico Collins. Nico Collins is a guy that I would want to trade into right now as well, if possible. I continue to want to trade into Jamar Chase. With your lineup, you're definitely going to have to build something crazy in order to get into Jamar Chase, and you'd probably have to give up either Coleman or Worthy in that deal to move up into Jamar Chase.
Which Coleman is the one you should trade instead of Worthy, unless you're getting Rice. You don't want two of the same team.
You could definitely,
if you're going for Chase, there's nothing wrong with Pickens, Coleman, and Pollard. Let's talk. You give me someone else to balance out the trade a little bit.
I'm definitely thinking about maybe, like we said, you want to upgrade significantly. So that's kind of the pieces that I would use. I'd also thinking about moving to Marcus Robinson, right? But more likely, as it comes down this pipeline, what I think you might have to do is do something more in the vein of Pickens and ETN for probably, like I was saying, you might be able to move Pickens and ETN maybe into a Devontae Adams and something else, and then flip Devontae Adams or whatever other piece you get into something else. That's kind of like my viewpoint on that. But Joe definitely pinpointed the players to think about. So, Andre, if you can, let us know what that team, like what wide receivers are you? Receiver better than DK. We see in Mick there too. So, Andre, drop what I would do. Go to the Amon-Ra owner. Go to the Jamar owner, go to the CD owner, go to the J. Jeff owner, go to the Rice owner, go to the Collins owner, and float some offers their way. let us know their lineups too, because we could probably put together some sort of package that.
Yeah, you're going to have the best bet with one of the guys who has been riddled with injuries. Your best bet is the injured owners, where if someone went, Cup or Puka and the other one's still healthy. So there's someone out there who just needs to get the win right now. This is what it's always be an advantage of doing the best player off of a losing team and giving him volume back. This is really what you're targeting at this time of the year.
Joe, Andre's other league. So this question is for Andre's other league. So he has a 10-man league. Just dropped 167 points on the opponent. Redraft 10-team, full PPR. Josh Allen, Mason, K9, Chase, Wilson, Olave, Kelsey. Flex is Godwin. Bench is Monty, Charbonnet, BTJ, Ridley, and Fergie.
You like Fergie, don't you?
Was thinking about trading for McBride. I think, Andre, I would do that.
Yeah, you include Kelsey in that trade.
Here's what I would do. I would do something like Kelsey and Ridley, or trying to see if somebody will buy in on Brian Thomas Jr. and move on from Kelsey, because Kelsey just doesn't look good right now. Mm-hmm. The targets just aren't there either. I also think that it's worth considering, and I'm not saying definitely do it, but you could probably do something along the lines of Garrett Wilson and Kelsey for McBride and somebody else really, really good right now, and slide Monty.
See, if I were you, I would do Olave and Kelsey for McBride. I'm giving you two trades here.
No, you need more.
I'd give you Wilson and Ridley for Ahmad.
Hey, JP.
Because it's time to get rid of Wilson for your long-term success. You can probably get Ahmad knowing they were drafted pretty close and people are still on that. You throw Ridley in there after his decent week. You're in a much safer position with Chase and Ahmad than you are with Chase and Wilson. Your bench essentially doesn't matter anyway. That would be the direction I would poke. I would make that a priority over getting the Arizona one, because Fergie's really not that far off of McBride anyway. If I were looking at this roster, my priority would be upgrading Garrett Wilson into either J. Jeff or Ahmad. That would be my priority of this team.
Yeah, I think I'd do that 1,000%. And if that owner happens to have McBride, you can make a blockbuster trade happen here, Andre. That's just,
sure good.
Again, it's something to really consider, Andre. And we can talk about it more as well today and tomorrow. So Joseph, back to one of your questions. Your roster was JT, Kyler, JT, Connor, AJ Brown, Debo, Higgins, Waddle, Hunter Henry, Bucky Moss, Charbonnet, Mostert, then more bench guys. And you asked earlier, and we were positioned here, would you trade Bucky and Zach Moss for Kenneth Walker and Worthy? And knowing and seeing your team here,
I would. I still would.
I would. Yeah, I definitely.
I just don't think you're going to get the trade through, but I would do it.
Yeah, I definitely would. So going here to TI, I think that's everybody's before TI. I have ETN and Tank Dell. What running back should I look to get for them? Hopefully that's JT, or is that ETN? What running back could I get for ETN and Tank Dell right now?
Yeah, assume it's ETN.
I'm going to assume that's ETN and TI if you're still with us.
Because if it's JT, you wouldn't be trading.
We'll get to that question there, Andre. I want to answer TI's question, then we'll come back to you, Andre, and we'll get to everybody's questions that are still in the chat here. What kind of running back could I get? I mean, I think from my opinion, I think that I'm trying to move my ETN shares over into Montgomery shares. I think that's just
I still think you get Najee for him. You get Najee, you get King Henry.
Yeah, I think you can get King Henry. Najee's not worth as much right now.
You don't need to put Dell in it, but I would do ETN for Najee. I would do ETN for Najee.
I wouldn't do that, but I would do ETN.
Yeah, we're in disagreement on that one.
I think Najee's not worth as much as ETN right now.
I see ETN as a declining asset in Harris.
That's fine, but he's still up there. I think you could still get a lot for him. So what kind of running back would I want to move into? You could probably move ETN for Najee and a piece. You could also probably move ETN and Dell for Monty straight up like that.
Or Henry.
You could. I don't think you can move him into Henry right now. You could probably move ETN and Dell and get yourself maybe into a James Conner. you could probably do something like that as well. I think that Dell, like we said in the middle of I think hour one, we were talking about Dell's. There are certain trades for Dell that make sense, and there's certain trades out of Dell that make sense because he's dealing with an injury right now. So I think, getting out of Dell, it would have to make sense for me to get out of Dell, right? It would have to make sense for that. Jonathan, you were talking earlier, been trying to make a trade with the Garrett Wilson and Bowers. Everyone is hogging their running backs. So thinking of dropping Javonte and Ray Davis for Roshan and Emmanuel Wilson. I don't know if I drop Ray Davis. When that game got out of control, Ray Davis came in the game. Emmanuel Wilson, that situation is definitely going to be a little bit trickier than we think it's going to be in the long term because, Marshawn Lloyd is on IR right now. Definitely has.
And Lloyd's coming back and being instantly in that offense. And
Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson rushed the ball 12 times for 50 yards, caught the ball. That game was a little out of order as well. And with Josh Jacobs already having a little bit dinged up with his back, Wilson's worth having, but I think I'd rather have Wilson. I'd rather have Davis over Wilson, but I would move out of Javonte, and I'd probably move out of Javonte into Emmanuel Wilson. But I could definitely see the value in Roshan Johnson. I just don't see the value in the Chicago running game right now, unless you're just vulturing touchdowns like Khalil Herbert or something like that.
Khalil Herbert's my dude, man.
I just don't see the value right now. But I get where the value could be in Roshan Johnson, but I think that there's more immediate value in Emmanuel Wilson more than Javonte Williams right now. So Aman asked, he has second waiver priority. Are any of these guys worth picking up? And I think Joe will tell you Tutu Atwell is worth picking up.
I love Michael Wilson too. Michael Wilson doesn't need injury help to be sustained. If there is an injury in Arizona, Wilson's value goes right up. I would go with Wilson. He's the safer bet. He's been a guy that we've been actually putting in our DFS lineups regularly. He's super cheap, by the way, guys. Yeah. And that's how we've been using him a lot. Michael Wilson, I have ahead of them. The issue here with Downs is flat out Richardson isn't good enough to get him the ball consistently. And Downs needs the volume. Actually, Downs is why Pittman is not worth owning. He's getting they're too similar in terms of target machines. Like I said, Atwell gives you the chance to go through the roof, but and the second that one of those,
Joe, the question is
those two real receivers come back. So my answer would be Wilson.
The question is, though, does he use a second waiver priority on him?
Yeah.
You think it's worth it? I think it's worth it.
No.
Too, I think
no, you don't need to.
Yeah, I think Michael. I think it's worth it, but yeah, you probably don't need to do that on Michael Wilson. You would probably need to use it on Atwell, but I think that you could go after Wilson without using that. And I just want to follow up here with Andre before we go to the next set of questions here. Andre said, "Are you confident with my running backs, Monty Mason, K9 Sharps?" Yes. These are running backs that are being given the rock. They have been performing. They're on offenses that know how to move the ball down the field. All of these running backs, the K9 Shards is definitely nice combination because you're buoying the expectation there with K9. I think you're set there. I wouldn't even think about trying to make moves at running back unless I'm trying to get after like a JT or something like that. I think that is so super solid that like I'm not even worried about that. Yeah, and then I'm on here. Douglas and Palmer on the waiver wire. Yeah, to come off your question, I don't think either of them are worth picking up right now. Mm-hmm. And if I were to drop anybody for Michael Wilson,
I don't think I want to drop any of them, quite frankly. I think I would ride without Wilson.
If I were you, Aman, I would continue to try to think about moving Pierce. We talked about this last week, I believe, as well, where Pierce isn't droppable, but he's not startable because there's not enough. And this was something that you said last week about Shaheed, Joe, in that the targets, and the same thing you said a little bit about JMO to the same degree, is that the targets for this wide receiver situation, right, isn't sustainable enough. And that they're both Rashid and Alec Pierce. Well, I like Rashid, and I suggested starting him last week, but I said, maybe temper the expectations there a bit. But when we look at these 2 wide receivers, you're kind of looking at a similar picture. Deep balls down the field, and their air yards are like through the roof.
Which is great.
Alec Pierce has 31.9 air yards per reception. Rashid Shaheed has 37.6 air yards for reception.
And both of them are great candidates to be the second guy in a trade to super upgrade out of position.
Yeah.
And that's how I view Pierce. Because you put Pierce, you do that same question we just had. Pierce and ETN. Well, now we're talking about a really high tier of
we'll
running
get to all the
back
questions. Yes.
you should be able to get in return. So Pierce and Shaheed, they're both in that category of I don't want to start them, but I do want to trade with someone who's down a receiver and take a really big upgrade in this trade.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're great 2-to-1 candidates.
Do I trade away Amari Cooper for Jaden Daniels and Tony Pollard? 3 wide receiver PPR. Other wide receivers are Wilson, Neighbors, Smith, Deontay Cup, Keon. Other QB is Love. Yes, I do this.
Yeah. I don't think you're getting that accepted, but I would totally do that.
If I could trade out of Amari Cooper, again, there's a lot of uncertainty with Amari Cooper. You could put out,
I would do it for Cooper and Daniels straight up. That's how much I want to get rid of Cooper.
But you're getting Pollard back on the back end. I think buying into Daniels is also smart, like we were talking about earlier. Maybe I wouldn't have traded Lamar for Daniels, but I do want to buy into Daniels enough with Love there. He might be a useless asset to you a couple weeks down the line, but he could definitely be flipped a little bit later as well. Amari Cooper's value. Maybe this was the week that Deshaun Watson found Amari Cooper, like we said, with 2 touchdowns, 7 receptions, I believe in like 80 yards or something like that. But is Deshaun Watson going to be capable of doing that every week? We still don't know yet. You're selling him.
Vegas is going to get embarrassed 2 weeks in a row by a subpar quarterback.
You're selling Amari Cooper for a good return. You're selling Amari Cooper for a good return.
Yeah, I would do this now. This is probably the peak of Amari Cooper's value.
Pollard had a down game, but this is definitely I would do that 100%. Chaka. I'm terrible at running back, Monkey. I got offered Mike Evans, Dobbins, and Steele for my Amon-Ra. Do I take it? I need to know the rest of your team, Monkey.
Yeah.
On paper, I don't want to trade out of Amon-Ra, but with knowing
also on paper, I don't think I hate that trade either.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Who are you going to have to cut?
Yeah, put your team in the chat if you're still here, Monkey. Put your team in the chat so we can kind of explore this a little bit with you. Hey, Jake, welcome. Hey, Dom.
We have basically lost no one over the last 30 minutes. They're all still here, Bob.
Monkey, if I would do this, but it depends on your team and it depends on who you'd have to drop. Okay, I would definitely do this. It's enough return on the value. I want to buy into Amon-Ra. I'm not selling Amon-Ra right now, but I think you're getting a valuable enough return with Mike Evans and Dobbins plus Steele. The guy's really turning over his waivers really well to get something really good. He's doing something that we suggest doing a lot of. And I would definitely consider that a lot. So tell us what your team is in the chat, Monkey, and we will try to help you out a little bit more. But I would definitely consider doing that deal. You're getting enough value back in return. Mick, 12-team PPR, first, second, third most points scored. Love, Hall, HN, Neighbors, Rice, Adams, Kittle, streaming defense and kicker. That's always smart to do. The bench is Rome, J-Mo, Tank, Dowdle, Bucky, and Braylon Allen. Love the bench. Any ideas beside trying to bundling Adams and Rome? Mick, if I'm moving up,
see, I'd actually rather bundle neighbors and Rome. Yeah, dude. I put the 2 rookies together. Yeah, I'll say that way. And the reason is first off, I think Rome Odunze is at its absolute peaks. He had the game of his life because Caleb Williams did. So I look at that, also knowing that at some point Keenan Allen's going to come back and eat him out. So you absolutely have to do that. I want to keep Devontae Adams over Malik Neighbors because what Malik Neighbors is doing is unsustainable. The target share he is getting is not sustainable. So I want to get rid of the 2 guys that are unsustainable when they return.
AJ, we see you.
And that's how I would go about it. And what I look at is, again, a guy who has one of the injured receivers that needs an upgrade needs a starter to get through this week. So I'm looking at trying to pick up the star injured receiver and one of his dudes, especially if it's especially if it's Debo.
And also, Mick, I know we talked about this earlier with a couple people that owned Achane. I think that Achane is a piece that's still worth a decent amount right now, who has a lot to give this season. But if you wanted to try to move Achane, that kind of movement could definitely put you in a great situation. Achane Adams, Achane Rome. An Achane Rome kind of move could put you into maybe a Jonathan Taylor at running back. Or a Bijan at running back, and then I'd solidify that spot a little bit more and not have to worry about what's happening in Miami. Because there's always a chance that Mostert comes back and Mostert eats into that HN. We don't know what the quarterback situation will look like. Maybe they go out and trade for a quarterback. Maybe they go out and get Bryce Young. Maybe they go out and trade for Russell Wilson, something like that. They have Tyler Huntley probably starting this week. So I'm not 100% sure that I want to be in all on HN. I think HN is going to have enough good weeks that it's going to be worth it. But I think I try to move HN and Rome and try to move into a Jonathan Taylor. I think that's kind of the best case scenario there. Because you're not giving up on Neighbors, you're not giving up on Adams, you're not giving up on Rice, but you're still giving a piece, giving a nice rookie piece, and then moving into something really good. And I think
you might even be able to deal with Achane and JMO though, and JMO's another guy I'd recommend moving. I think
it's a plausible get, because here's the thing: Dowdle right now is really worth nothing. I think Dowdle is worth less than Bucky and Braylon Allen right now. That's just a personal opinion. I think the stats back it up as well. X, I saw 2 questions from you, X, so we'll get to both your questions here. Is Juwan Jennings worth burning the number 1 waiver priority on in PPR? I have Puka, Cup, AJ Brown, and Neighbors. I feel this. I understand this. This makes a lot of sense to me. I feel this. So, X, to answer your question, Adrian, we see your questions. We'll definitely get to your questions as well. Sebastian, I see you back. Blue Jays, we'll get to your question here. When I see this, X, do I think it's worth burning the number 1 priority on? We talked a little bit earlier about this, is that if a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, Michael Wilson, Darnell Mooney, or that ilk of players is out there on the waiver wire right now, or Alan Lazard, it makes more sense to not burn that waiver 1 priority on Juwan Jennings, because when we would have wanted to buy Juwan Jennings was last week. After we heard the Kittle,
and it cost the number 1 waiver wire last week.
Right now, is this sustainable? I think that Juwan Jennings without Debo could definitely get another 60, 70, 80, 100-yard game, but he's not going to get the 3 touchdowns because he's not going to be as wide open. So you might be looking at a 60 yards with a touchdown and maybe 6 receptions, which is great. Do I think and like I said, there are performers across the league. Is there going to be another one like this in the league? I don't know if that's going to happen again this year.
I think Mike Wilson is a candidate for it. You don't have to spend anything on him. And I also look at this. You got to look at what the league is telling you in real life. Sean McVay is an incredibly intelligent coach. I'd argue he's one of the 3 best statistical smart coaches in the league. And his decision was, don't bother covering this guy. So that should tell you a lot about, do I want to invest in the guy that one of the smartest coaches, even after he'd scored 3 touchdowns, said, oh, don't cover him, let him get a 4th because he can't beat us. And guess what? He was right. So I don't want to burn my first waiver pick on that guy. I like I said, Mike Wilson is a guy I like. If he's on your waiver wire, you also don't need to burn a priority on him. Exactly. Tutu Atwell, you don't need to burn a priority on him. That's how I look at it. And that's how I would go about it, because just imagine an Arizona team if one of those top 2 go down. Mike Wilson's going to be the instant star as the next one up.
Yeah, and to this next question here, you have X. You have 2 questions here and 1 question down on the back end here. Flexing Najee or Akers this week. The flex is Najee. It's not even a question. The only question is when that injury report comes out. If Najee's not able to handle the load, I think one of those sneaky pickups on the back end later this week, if Warren can't go and Najee can't go, is Cordarrelle Patterson. I think that right now, as we sit on Tuesday, Najee is my flex. If for some reason he cannot go, then obviously you're going to put in Cam Akers. But that's definitely something that we'll have to wait a little bit further on into the week to kind of see. We're going to get to X's second question here and then come back up to the top here. 2 different leagues. So is Kmet worth wavering? If I have Njoku, Parkinson, and Kincaid, no. You're starting Kincaid. I don't think that Kmet, like I said to Joe earlier, and like we said to the audience earlier, Kmet's going to have good games. Kmet's also going to throw up stinker games. This was a game where everybody feasted on Chicago. Everybody feasted on Chicago. And when you look at, is that likely to happen again this week? It could happen, but it's going to be, they're not facing Indianapolis every single week. So, when you look at it, is Kmet worth getting? Yes. Is he worth wavering? No. That's kind of just how I feel on that side of things. And I think, Joe, from what you said earlier, Joe, you'd kind of agree with that as well.
Yeah, but I also would trade one of those two tight ends because you don't need all three on your roster.
Yeah. Adrian, good to have you, Adrian. You're in a predicament. We'll try to help you out here. I have CD, but lost Cup sounds like my team. And have one Scrubs trying to fill in also sounds like my team. Stacked at running back, though. That sounds like my team, too. Gibbs, Mason, Achane, and Kyron. Wow, nice. Do I trade Gibbs for Jamar?
Trade Achane.
Yeah, I'd try to move Achane for Jamar. If I couldn't move Achane for Jamar, I would then move Gibbs. If they want Gibbs and I could get Jamar and that trade could be done right now, I'd do it.
I'd just rather move Achane for everything Bob said earlier about Mostert's kind of dig into him.
If I'm floating the trade out there, Adrian, if I'm floating that trade out there, I wouldn't start with Gibbs. I'd start with Achane. The scariest part is if I trade Gibbs and lose Mason to McCaffrey or maybe McAfee, he doesn't come, or maybe McCaffrey doesn't come back regular season card with the injury. This would be dream scenario for me. CD, Chase, and Cup if healthy. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, Adrian.
Yeah.
So when we look at this, Adrian, I think that the move for you isn't to trade Gibbs. It's to trade out of Achane. Trade Achane. See if you could get Jamar. If you can't get Jamar, move Gibbs. Then you're starting Mason, Kyron, and Achane, which is really still very, very good on a week-to-week basis. You come back, you got Jamar, you have CD, and you have Cup for the long haul. That's a championship winning team. Love the emoji at the back end here. That is a championship level team. So hopefully those injuries all pan out. JP, CD and Rashad for Neighbors.
We might have to put last call on questions, guys. We're coming up the top of the hour. It's about the time we're going to wrap up.
CD and Rashad for Neighbors and ETN. I want to move out of Rashad. Do I think Neighbors and ETN is enough for CD?
No.
I don't think it is. If I'm getting CD,
yes,
I would consider it, but I don't really want any part of Rashad White, JP. So you have Kyron as well. Man, that's a tough one, JP. When I looked at that trade initially, I think
I don't want.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that, JP. If I'm trading out a CD for Neighbors and ETN, I don't know if I do that because that's a tough one.
There's too much risk with Neighbors. I mean, it's a long story. Neighbors is unsustainable and CD's about to tear it up. So no, I would need something much better than Neighbors in return.
Yeah, and
long story
Joe,
short.
To follow up before we get to the rest of the questions here, the guy wants Gibbs and he'll give him Jamar. I think you do it. I really don't have.
Yeah, I'd rather Achane, but yeah, you do it if you can get Chase on that team.
I don't really have any hesitation about that, Adrian. Both are good players. Both have good schedules. Both are on good enough teams. Both are going to get the rock. So I have no question about that. Who should I give up in the Gibbs trade? Josh Jacobs or Aaron Jones? I think it's dealer's choice. When I look at the schedules for both of these, teams coming down the woodwork here, Sam Darnold has been playing great. Is that going to be sustainable long term? We'll see. They play.
I would say Jacobs, and here's my reason why.
Packers, Jets,
Aaron Jones is a bigger
Rams,
share of the offense.
Yeah. Jacobs is Aaron Jones is sitting here with Packers, Jets, Lions, Rams, Colts, Jaguars on the schedule coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, but Aaron Jones is also the number 2 target on his team in terms of ball carrying and percentage of the offense. When Love comes back, Josh Jacob falls back to like 4th. So I would give Josh Jacob maximizing on the Love injury, which is the bubble that he's riding right now.
Yeah, and I think they already played Indy, so you're getting Indy if you were to keep Aaron Jones. So I think I'd move Jacobs in that deal. I think I'd move Jacobs in that deal. Gaming, Mateo, can you guys rank Pickens, JSN, Deontay Johnson, and Jameson Williams for the rest of the season? Joe, what do you say?
So rest of the season, JSN is going to be my starting point. Pickens and Deontay are hard because both of their quarterbacks could fall off a cliff on any second, particularly Deontay. But I do trust volume more than anything else. So I would rank it as JSN, Pickens, Deontay, JMO.
And I'd probably rate it about the same. You're welcome, X. And yes, gaming. Again, we would trade Jacobs and JMO for Gibbs. We would trade Jacobs and JMO for Gibbs. We appreciate the love, X, for sure. Let's go back up to the top with some of these other comments and questions. Yeah. I'm on. I feel this. I feel this deeply for my other home league. Next week, going to have Gibbs and Dobbins on a bye week with only Brian Robinson and Javonte would be my running backs. Jonathan,
got your Javonte now, man.
Yeah, it's a dicey spread of things, but I think you do have to move on from Javonte because even with that bye week coming up, again, bye weeks are coming up, so we do have to be aware of that. That's why I like buying into Gibbs right now. Right, is that if you're trading him away, that's great, because you're probably getting a great asset back. But Gibbs's bye week is early. And I like those early bye weeks, or I like a really late bye week. I like those early bye weeks because if I'm trading for Gibbs and I'm only missing out on 1 week of production really early, and then I'm getting him for the rest of the season, I'm good with that. I think in these deals where, we got to think about this going forward, but Javonte Williams is not worth it to me, Jonathan. And, we talked about this as well. And so Adrian was just talking a little bit about that to Aman about the 8-man league. Should I trade Rachaad White with Laporta to get a different tight end, or how would you suggest getting rid of White? I think that moving Laporta and White, Laporta has had a downswing plus the injury. Obviously, he came back, but I think that moving Rachaad White right now, Miggy, you're going to have to do a little bit of magic work, and we can talk a little bit more about
it. That's the right formula, though.
That's the right formula.
It's Rachaad White and a different position. So whatever position you're trying to upgrade is what you need to target. So if you want to get a receiver back, you got to include a receiver, and then anything else down the line.
I think personally, you would have to move Rachaad White and Ayuk.
Yeah,
if you're moving Rachaad White and Ayuk has also had down games, but the upward swing is there for his future. If you move both Rachaad White and Ayuk, you could probably move into something fairly decent, if not a 2-for-2, then a 2-for-1. I think that that's definitely possible, Miggy.
And you should be aiming high, like a CD with that trade.
Yeah, and we can definitely talk more about this tomorrow.
Or correction, you had CD, Chase.
Jake, should I trade Hill away? Do you think I should trade for Jamar or Bijan? I absolutely think you should trade for Jamar, and I think it would be fair enough to offer, at least last week it was, this week maybe not so much, Hill straight up for Jamar Chase if the person believes more in Hill or Jamar. I think Hill could also be offered for Bijan because, again, Bijan's kind of in that kind of, we were talking about, he's going to be fine.
Wait, Jake, you're living the life of Tyreek now, because those are basically the only two guys that are worth trading Hill for, and there's no guarantee they're going to say yes. So
I think it's worth,
that's the reality.
Jake, I think it's worth considering that trade to get out of him. Jackson, we see your questions. What trades do we think you can make? I have Lamar, Barkley, Kenneth Walker, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek, Kittle, Niners defense, and Justin Tucker at kicker. Yeah, we can, Dom. We'll get to that next. If I were you, I would move Hill.
I might ride that.
I'd move Hill. Try to get into that, like that running back that we were talking about. Try to move into the Bijan. But this team, I think if you were to ride it, is good. I mean, there's a lot of top tier talent on this team. If you're unsettled on Kenny Walker, though, and you want to try to move into the Bijan, I think that the Tyreek move would be the move that you would have to do.
And then you would have to do Walker for a Metcalf type thing.
Yeah, you would definitely have to do that.
But I'm not sure that's a net win. I'm really not. I think I'd ride this team.
Dom, we see you. Who do I start at flex this week? Pittman can't be started. Cortland Sutton can't be started. Rico Dowdle can't be started.
Dom, dude, we need to get you some trades.
So I think for that reason, Dom, and what I said earlier about what the Jets offer as a team, to be honest with you, I'm probably out of all those guys, I know that, and here's why I start Braylon Allen is that Flores blitzes a lot.
He does.
A lot. They're going to have to get the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands very quick. This could be a really good game for both Hall and Allen in the receiving work for the running backs. This could also be
the reality is
Conklin game.
Trade Pittman and Rico Dowdle for the best player you can possibly get, who should be a tier above Pittman.
Yeah, I'm trading out of Pittman any chance I get. I'm trading out of Pittman. So I would start Braylon Allen out of those guys, Don, but we can also talk more about it tomorrow. Trade Debo, Hunter Henry for Olave and Goddard. I would consider this heavily. Joe and I both love Debo, and we're not too big on Olave. But again, if they're going to be in really tight games, Olave is going to have a lot of usage. You upgrade to Goddard, and Goddard is an upgrade while these wide receivers are banged up.
As long as one of the two of them are hurt, it's an upgrade. Yeah.
While the wide receivers are healthy, you're probably going to go back down to 100 Henry type numbers anyway. So this, to me, in the interim,
it basically comes down to how long is Debo hurt for.
Yeah, if you need it right now, I do this trade right now. If I need to win right now, I do this trade because I think that the assets you're getting in return are good enough long-term value to offset giving up on Debo.
And if you're 2-1 or better, I sit on this trade because Debo's value goes up every week.
Do I trade Brian Robinson for Zay Flowers? Yes.
Yes.
I trade Brian Robinson for Zay Flowers. In my mind, that's not even a question. I do love Brian Robinson's future on this team this year, but I love Zay Flowers more. I'm on Rashad and Pierce for Najee and JMO. That's the type of trade that I would start to consider, right? I would be moving out of Rashad White. I would move on from Alec Pierce. I'd try to jump into Najee and jump into JMO. Again, Najee could have games that are 60 yards and no receptions. That we know that's going to happen out of Najee, but we also know that Rashad White's not going to run the ball either. But for Najee, we know that there's a touchdown potential there, at least on the ground. JMO, you get
and quite frankly, Ahmad, I wouldn't even get hung up if they don't want to give you JMO. Just getting Najee by itself might be worth it.
I agree with that. Blue Jays, which side would you rather have, Lamb and Monty or Rice and Kamara? Oh my God.
Lamb and Monty.
I would rather have Rice and Kamara, but it's close. It's very, very close for me. I love Monty's work. I love Lamb, but Rice has been looking amazing, and Kamara obviously does get a lot more usage in that receiver room.
I look at it like this: is Kamara has a chance of falling off, the other three don't.
Hey, Chris, we see you there. So, yeah, I definitely see that as a possibility. Joe's on Lamb and Monty. I'm on Rice and Kamara, but I could easily be swayed. I just really think Rice is playing really well right now. Traded McLaurin and Jamar Chase for Devonta Smith and DK. How bad did I mess up? I don't think you messed up that bad. Jamar is a great player. Last week and this week, I've said Jamar is a guy to trade out of or trade into depending upon your team's situation. What I'm looking at here is you got a little bit concerned about Terry McLaurin last week, which is fair. That was a fair point to make. Terry McLaurin did not look good the previous 2 weeks. Devonta Smith, you bought into Devonta Smith knowing that A.J. Brown would be out a couple weeks. It's unfortunate that Devonta Smith got concussed, basically. Got hit really hard. You got a back end on the DK. DK's great, Karush. So I'm not thinking you messed up at all.
Yeah, I mean, you got 2 and 3 and you gave away 1 and 4.
And I think this trade is fair. I don't think you messed up at all, but you are going to have to find something if Devonta Smith can't go this week. So that's kind of the only thing there. Or Swift instead of Najee. I'm not buying Swift, Amon.
No, don't buy Swift.
Do not buy into Swift. Joe was talking a little bit about Swift. I'm buying into Najee, not buying into Swift. You're welcome, X. That's what we're here for. I need help. I'm back. Love to have you, Recon. I have Josh Allen, Saquon, Kyron, Zay, Pickens, Laporta, my non-existent flex, and Brandon Aubrey. My offer right now is Kyron for Devontae Adams and Rachaad White. I'm not moving into Rachaad White, Recon.
Yeah, but I am moving out of Kyron. I'd like getting Devontae Adams for Kyron, though. We just need to get a better second piece with it.
Recon, knowing that you have, Keon, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Braylon Allen, you got some decisions to make on a weekly decision tree, basically, Recon. But if I can
do Kirk and Kyron for Adams and another running back.
Yeah, I really don't want Rachaad White, but I would like to move into Devontae Adams based off of your team.
If you throw Kirk in there, you should be able to upgrade the running back, your return, and that will put you in a better spot.
I'm telling you right now, Recon, try to move yourself into Monty. We were talking about trying to really upgrade and moving into big pieces. But again,
Monty and a number 2 receiver is what you should be targeting for on that in that type of trade.
When I look at usages, when we look at usages, I'm on the New York Giants right now. Gross.
Let's not do that.
When we look at usages, and I want to look at players across the whole season, right, in terms of just production, guys I'd be looking to move into, just like we were talking about earlier, James Cook, Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs, J.K. Dobbins. I want to work my way into guys like that if I'm giving up Kyron, because Kyron has a big workload. He's going to produce. Some weeks are going to be better than others. We just saw that this past week versus the other week. I think that when I look at your team, that moving on from Kyron and getting Pickens maybe out of your starting lineup is like a good start, but I'm not looking at Rachaad White. So maybe even if I had to downgrade a little bit from Devontae and maybe take on something like Montgomery, and give me another wide receiver here, Joe.
Just whoever the receiver 2 is on Monty's team.
Montgomery and Jaden Reed. And Jaden Reed, if you can get something like that with people maybe not selling high on Jaden Reed, I think that's definitely worth it, because Monty is much better than Rachaad White, I believe, moving forward 1,000%. Jackson, should I trade away Kamara and Hubbard to acquire Metcalf, Pollard, and Pickens? I would definitely think about it.
I would probably do that.
I think that Kamara still holds a lot of value right now, even after, he didn't get that many touchdowns in in this past week.
A lot of Pollard and Pickens questions tonight, Bob.
But it really depends. It really depends for me. You're moving out of Hubbard, which I think is smart because Jonathan Brooks should come back, be healthy. You're turning basically that into Pollard and Pickens. We said that Pollard maybe over the course of the season doesn't have as much long-term value. But again, you're getting some short-term value there. This week, they were basically locked out. So, I'm not writing – this week I'm writing off a little bit. I would do that. I would definitely do that because Kamara and Metcalf are both elite options at their position right now. And you're getting some potential with Pickens and Pollard, whereas Chuba's definitely going to get some yards, with this offense right now. But I think it's something that you have to really consider there. So, Nick, trade Singletary, Stevenson, and Garrett Wilson for Diggs, Brian Robinson Jr., K9, and Ridley. That's a lot. That's a lot to. I don't really know if it's an upgrade. I don't know if it's an upgrade.
It's not.
Singletary is really doing well enough right now. Amon just said, he's your running back one. Desperate times call for desperate measures, but he's been playing very well right now. Diggs and Brian Robinson has also been playing well right now. I would love to move into K9, but I would not do this trade.
And you guys know how much I'm all about trading Garrett Wilson away.
If you're moving Garrett Wilson and Stevenson, you have to be upgrading Garrett Wilson or Stevenson drastically. If you're moving Garrett Wilson or Stevenson, you have to be upgrading them drastically. Jake, do you think that this is a trade someone would accept? I get Bijan and Jamar. He gets Tyreek, Kenneth Walker, and Samir White. No.
That's too much.
I don't think that gets accepted. I think more along the lines of you might be able to move Tyreek and Samir for Jamar. You might be able to move Tyreek and Zamir for Bijan. This is what Joe was saying earlier about using Zamir. If you're not going to play him and you don't want to drop him, then you have to use him as a piece. Right now, he's a very back end bye week flex. Okay, he's a very back end bye week flex right now in the league, and people will buy that. People will buy that, but they're not going to buy him with They're not going to like you.
You're asking for too much. Take Walker out and pick which one of those two you want more, Jamar or Bijan.
Yeah, I would definitely think about that. Recon, we'll get to that question in a minute. Let's hit Chris's questions here. Chris, hopefully you're still with us here. Trade Ayuk and Godwin for Olave and Diggs.
Nope.
I wouldn't do that. Godwin's production has been a bit better than Diggs's right now, and a lot better actually. And Olave has been doing well enough with what he's been given. I don't do that trade. Chris.
You can't trade away the guy with the highest potential and the highest production.
But what I will tell you is that Godwin could give you more in a trade. Right now, the production is elite. We agree with you. We don't know how long he's going to keep it up. He might keep it up, like we said, for 6, 7, 8 games and then kind of fall off. There's going to be a couple of games in between that are not very good.
But Ayuk's potential is by far the highest.
Yeah, if I'm moving Godwin, I would want to float Godwin and maybe another piece to move into maybe because Godwin's value is the highest it's going to be right now. You could probably buy into a Nico Collins if you put the right piece with Godwin. You could probably put Godwin in with somebody else to move into a Debo, and when Debo comes back, you'll have Ayuk and Debo. If you don't want to move into Debo, you could probably move Godwin and a piece to move into AJ Brown, who when they come back should be an elite option. You could probably move Godwin and a piece for Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. Those are all guys that would be a better upgrade because I don't think that Olave and Diggs upgrades you in any way from Ayuk and Godwin. I don't think it's an upgrade at all, especially when you consider their schedules and the way their teams have been playing. Joseph just executed that Bucky Moss for Kenneth Worthy trade. Where should I make upgrades? So you got Kyler, JT Connor, AJ Brown, Debo, Higgins, Waddle, Hunter Henry, Charbonnet, Mostert, Frymouth, Bigsby, Tutu. Where I would target right now is my tight end. If I'm upgrading any position right now, it's my tight end. So maybe what I do is I take Bigsby and Hunter Henry and try to move up into
well, that's not going to take you very high up the chain.
Yeah, but again, this is like the dollar book, right? The dollar card trade up. I would definitely think about moving up in terms of the tight end.
I think the one that's be better for you to move would be Higgins in one of the tight ends. Then you could actually make a jump into the tight end pool.
Yeah, Higgins and Hunter Henry could probably move you up into a Jake Ferguson. Maybe could move you up into a
Ferguson and change.
A McBride. I definitely consider that. I'm playing against the guy with Monty and Reed, so he will not give either. I wish. Yeah. If I get Tyreek and Rashad for Kyron and Corum, no.
No, you kind of want to trade, despite the 3 touchdowns this week, you kind of want to trade out of the Rams running game.
Yeah, I'm not trading. I don't know if I'm trading into Kyron. I'm holding Kyron if I have him and I can't get a major upgrade for him.
I want to majorly sell Kyron right now. I don't want to buy him. I want to sell him.
Yeah, and I'm saying I'm holding him unless I can get a major upgrade. I don't think a Tyreek, Rashad for Kyron and Corum kind of trade
is nowhere near it.
And we can talk more about this tomorrow for sure, Recon. We'll be on tomorrow. Trade Terry and Goddard for Nico Collins. Yes, absolutely. 1,000% yes. If you can get that through, do it. 1,000% yes. And we're going to end the show on a good note there.
We are.
If I could do that, if I could turn Terry McLaurin's performance and Goddard's amazing performance into Nico Collins, 1,000% I do it. So team players, thanks for joining us today. A little bit of a longer show today, but we'll be back tomorrow.